Have you seen the news? Yesterday, a goddess from Qin Yi high school awakened a 34-kilometer planet and was directly written into the Qin planetary awakening history. Truly, she made her mark in a single stroke. Good heavens. When I saw the news yesterday, I knelt down and bowed in worship on the spot. I hope I can awaken a planet today too. Even if it's only a few kilometers, I'll accept it. 30 kilometers. With origin power transformed into high-level energy at a 100% success rate, Qin is about to produce another immortal fairy. Alas, speaking of this, I can't help thinking of the fairy Mingxi from back then. What a pity. Today is a joyous occasion, don't say such disheartening things. By the way, if I could awaken a 20-kilometer planet, I would have no worries for the rest of my life. At Qin Yi high school outside the awakening chambers, the high school students waiting in line were murmuring in hushed voices. These days marked their comingafage ceremony and also the time when high school students across the entire Great Yan awakened their planets. From time to time, astonishing news would appear. Qin Yi, standing at the very back of the class queue, was perfectly calm. He was someone who had transmigrated here. The moment he opened his eyes, he had become a high school student in the Great Yan Empire. What they studied was not mathematics, physics, or chemistry, but how to forge a planetary civilization and turn themselves into transcendent powerhouses. By using an awakening stone, they awakened the planet within their bodies. Based on the size of the planet, they judged its origin power, then transformed it into planetary energy to build a planetary civilization. Some transformed sword key energy into sword cultivation civilizations where everyone on the planet was a sword cultivator. Some transformed spiritual key energy into immortal cultivation civilizations where everyone on the planet was an immortal. Some transformed inerky energy into martial artist civilizations where everyone on the planet was a martial artist. A successful awakening meant that you would become the lord of a planet. From then on, wealth and glory awaited you. But if the awakening failed, you would remain an ordinary person living an ordinary life, or perhaps become a hired laborer working for a lord. It could be described as one step to heaven, one step to hell. That was why Awakening Day was an absolutely vital day for high school students like Qin Yi. Ding! The door of the awakening chamber swung open. The students from the previous class walked out with varied expressions. Those who had awakened successfully were naturally overjoyed, their faces brimming with delight. Wealth and honor awaited them. Those who had failed to awaken hung their heads in dejection. For the rest of their lives, they could only be commoners without even a chance to climb upward. A few girls even walked out of the awakening chamber in tears. Class 6 may enter now. One person per awakening room. Enter in order. Do not make noise, do not damage the awakening stones, and do not disrupt discipline. The dean in charge of the awakening was also a planet awakener. His words instantly silenced the class queue that had been buzzing with discussion. Qin Yi followed the crowd into an awakening room. It was a small private room with a monitoring camera overhead that could observe the chamber. On the platform ahead lay a black stone. It looked perfectly smooth yet utterly unremarkable. Legend had it that 100 years ago a black meteorite fell from the sky, and when someone touched it, a planet awakened within their body. He became the first planet owner in human history. It was from that time onward that everyone in this world could awaken a planet, become a transcendent powerhouse, and command the power of a planet. This black awakening stone was only an imitation. Inside it was stored a trace of origin power. When a person touched the awakening stone, origin power would enter the body, stimulate potential, and awaken a planet. If someone failed to awaken, the origin power would return to the awakening stone. If the awakening succeeded, origin power could be transformed into planetary energy, allowing them to build a planetary civilization. These were things everyone had learned back in elementary school. Dear students, please prepare yourselves. The awakening begins now. A crisp voice came over the broadcast. All the students raised their right hands and placed them on the awakening stones. Qin Yi took a deep breath. In this world, whether one was a dragon or a worm, all depended on this single opportunity. A wisp of gas drifted up from the awakening stone, passed through his arm, and entered his body. Truly miraculous. This was origin power. It could not only awaken a planet within a person, but could also be transformed into planetary energy. The strength of an awakener was ranked at this very moment. The larger the awakened planet, the greater its potential. Origin power would also be more easily transformed into extremely advanced planetary energy. For example, spiritual energy, magic, martial spirits, battle chi, sword chi, demonic chi, ghostly chi, and all kinds of other planetary energy. If the awakened planet was very small, its potential would naturally be very limited. At best, it would be a martial artist planet. At worst, it would be a perfectly ordinary planet, as worthless as a chicken rib. Qin Yi carefully sensed his body, unable to keep his heartbeat from accelerating. At last, he discovered a purple space within his body. It was completely empty. This was the awakening. Qin Yi cautiously controlled his right hand, calmed his heartbeat, and focused entirely on awakening the planet that belonged to him. How large a planet he could awaken would be decided in these short few minutes. Would he amaze the world at first try, or would he continue living an ordinary life? This was also the one and only awakening day. The process of awakening a planet was not complicated. Only yesterday the teacher had gone through it once more with the students. Qin Yi focused his mind on the awakening space, awaiting the final judgment of origin power. After about a minute, he sensed a golden speck appear within that space. That single speck alone was enough to make Qin Yi's heart surge. It meant that he had successfully awakened a planet. Now it all depended on how much volume this planet could form. In his perception, the golden speck slowly grew larger, becoming a tiny object like a marble. About 5 minutes passed. The sphere stopped growing and seemed to be gradually taking shape. Qin Yi was stunned. What kind of cosmic joke was this? Was his planet really only this tiny? A sense of loss welled up from the depths of his heart. Ever since he had transmigrated to this world and learned that everyone could awaken a planet, Qin Yi had worked hard to study this knowledge. His purpose was to transform origin power into planetary energy on this day, and then begin building a planetary civilization. From then on, he would become the strongest person in this world. But heaven had played a huge joke on him. What kind of civilization could such a tiny planet forge? Qin Yi's heartbeat accelerated once more. Unwillingness, disappointment, confusion, and other emotions surged into his heart all at once. Ding! A mysterious sound as if from beyond the 9 netherworlds echoed within Qin Yi's mind. The host has been detected to have successfully awakened a planet. The Great Tao deduction system is now officially activated. A projection panel materialized directly before Qin Yi's eyes. Planetary civilization, none. Planet level 1, planet diameter 1 kilometer, planetary species 0, evolution path none. Indeed, the planet Qin Yi had awakened was a mere kilometer in diameter. For an ordinary awakener, a planet of this size would find it incredibly difficult to give rise to any form of life, let alone converting the primordial essence into planetary energy. However, Qin Yi was no longer disheartened. With the system in hand, how could he fear failure in transformation or a lack of life? According to his teacher's instructions, every awakener receives such a projection panel after awakening their planet. It allowed one to monitor their planet's data in real time. Yet beneath Qin Yi's projection panel, an additional evolution path option appeared. He whispered softly, "System, what does the evolution path do?" A few lines of text materialized on the panel. Evolution path, planetary development, route simulation initiated. Simulation results: 1. Convert primordial essence into planetary spiritual energy, forging a cultivation civilization planet. Success rate 0.00001. 2. Convert primordial essence into internal energy for the planet, forging a martial artist civilization planet. Success rate 0.1. 3. Convert primordial essence into standard planetary energy, forging a mundane civilization planet. Success rate 50. For convert primordial essence into light energy, perfecting the planet's environment for biological origins. Over time, let the planet autonomously birth life, forging a mundane civilization planet. Success rate 99. After reading this, Qin Yi immediately chose the 4th option. The others weren't even worth considering. They were doomed to fail. Even converting to standard planetary energy, birthing life, seemed nearly impossible. Converting to light energy, perfecting the environment for biological origins. This is akin to Earth in my past life, where species originated from single-celled organisms. Qin Yi pondered, gazing at the panel. At that moment, the broadcast sounded again. Student No. 1. Awakening successful, planet diameter 10 kilometers. Student No. 2. Awakening failed. Student No. 3. The awakening successful, planet diameter 26 kilometers. Student No. 4. Student No. 28. Awakening successful, planet diameter 27 kilometers. This announcement notably carried a slight tremor of excitement. Today, Qin No. 2 High School had produced 2 awakeners with planets exceeding 20 kilometers, nearing 30. This year's advancement rate was already secured. Student No. 81. Awakening successful, planet diameter 1 kilometer. Finally, it was Qin Yi's turn. The announcement was flat, as such occurrences were common. Planetary awakening complete. Students who have successfully awakened their planets may now begin converting primordial essence. Qin Yi was lost in thought. The outcome of the 4th evolution path mirrors how life began on Earth. It requires light, water, suitable temperatures, and an atmosphere. The birth of single-celled organisms seems to start with things like algae, then single-celled animals. But merely meeting the 4 conditions of light, water, temperature, and atmosphere is no easy feat. Qin Yi frowned, transitioning from the disappointment of awakening a mere 1-kilometer planet to the spark of hope reignited by the system's arrival. Once the initial surge of excitement faded, he regained his composure. The 4th path the system offered appeared to have a high success rate, but there was still that 1% chance of failure. Ultimately, it was all a gamble. System, I choose the 4th evolution path. In the end, Qin Yi selected the 4th option with its highest probability of success. He realized that after life was born, there might still be a chance for him to walk the path of the strong. A A surge of knowledge not originally his own flooded directly into Qin Yi's mind, much like a data transfer. He instinctively understood how to execute the fourth evolution path. The planet Qin Yi had awakened was minuscule, resembling a large, oval-shaped boulder. Its surface was covered in rock, and its temperature was quite low. Aside from that, it was barren. At this juncture, the Awakener needed to use their primordial essence to convert it into planetary energy. If one could convert it into spiritual energy, life would appear on the planet within days, allowing everyone to cultivate. Qin Yi, however, needed to convert his primordial essence into light energy. This was one of the essential prerequisites for life. Qin Yi carefully controlled his primordial essence, beginning the slow process of conversion. Fortunately, converting primordial essence into basic elements was simpler than converting it into high-tier planetary energy. Above this small, earthen-yellow planet, a perfectly positioned radiant ball of golden energy hung suspended. The artificial sun was a resounding success, and there was even primordial essence to spare. It was then that Qin Yi understood why the system's fourth evolution path boasted such a high success rate. The radiant golden energy sphere initiated a nuclear fusion reaction. The temperature on the earthen planet began to rise steadily. Next came liquid water and the atmosphere. Like a creator god, Qin Yi used his primordial essence to form water elements and the atmosphere. During the process of converting primordial essence into planetary energy, it wasn't as simple for others as it was for him. It all seemed perfect, yet many awakeners failed during this conversion due to various reasons. The result was either the planet exploding instantly into dust, or the primordial essence dissipating, leaving the planet without energy and turning it into a dead, desolate world. Qin Yi knew his success was largely thanks to the simulation system. With light, water, and atmosphere, I also need to establish settings for magnetic fields, gravity, the crust, and gravitational pull. The formation of a planet is no simple task. After converting his primordial essence into light, water, and atmospheric elements, Qin Yi made some further adjustments. And so a water-rich planet suitable for life was forged. However, the origin of life is a long drawn-out. According to knowledge from his past life, it would take nearly 100 million years. Yet the flow of time within an awakener's planet here mirrored the reality outside. This was the stark difference between high-tier and low-tier awakeners. Qin Yi couldn't possibly wait 100 million years. System, can you accelerate the planet's time flow? It was time to rely on the system again. Time flow accelerator host may designate the planet's time flow rate. A line of text appeared on the panel before Qin Yi. Having the system truly made a world of difference. The poor rely on their awakening, the rich on technology. Qin Yi relied on the system. He immediately chose a ratio of 1100 million. Instantly, the Earth's crust began to move on the earthen planet. What was once half ocean and half rocky continent transformed into several vast oceans. The atmosphere began to change as well. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The air's molecular structure altered under the influence of the lightning. Clouds churned violently. The vast oceans also continued to shift rapidly. As time flowed, organic molecules finally appeared on this tiny planet. Then came organic compounds. Proteins were synthesized. Various trace elements began to appear in the water, initiating chemical reactions. Macromolecules appeared. In just 1 minute, the first life was born on the earthen planet within Qin Yi. Planetary civilization, none, planet level 1, planet diameter 2 kilometers, planetary species 1, evolution path, light energy, conversion, origin of life. Qin Yi glanced at the panel again and noticed his planet's diameter had grown by 1 kilometer. This was the meaning of the birth of life. The size of a planet was not fixed at the moment of awakening. Instead, it was determined by the number of species on the planet and the magnitude of the planet's energy in later stages. This was why awakeners who awakened high-level planets were called the favored children of heaven. They could awaken relatively large planets at the very beginning of their awakening. Then they successfully transformed their source power into high-level planetary energy, initiating the birth of life and further increasing the planet's diameter. Since the dawn of the awakening era, the only known high-level planet belonged to the divine civilization. At the moment of awakening, it was a 50-kilometer planet. In a single day, it could birth a deity, and the planet could grow to a diameter of 100 kilometers. Now he was a supreme planet lord, one of the 10 human pinnacles in this world. Planet awakening complete. Please wait patiently, students. Proctors will now make the final records of each student's planet to complete the awakening registration. The broadcast sounded again. Qin Yi could already hear some sobbing, or perhaps the low cries of delight. Awakening a planet had a far greater impact on one's life than the college entrance exams of his past life. At this moment, the path of life was already clearly defined. Proctors formed by the school committee began recording the final results for the students of this class. Qin Yi waited quietly. Meanwhile, on his panel, the planet's diameter was still increasing. The species on the planet began to multiply and grow at a rapid pace. Until a line of text appeared on the panel, time accelerator usage duration expired. Qin Yi. Planetary civilization, non-planet level 1 planet diameter, 35 kilometers planetary species, 2659 evolution path light, energy, conversion, Qin Yi. Awaken or no. 1 final result, 15 kilometers. Awaken or no. 3 final result, 22 kilometers. Awaken or no. 28 final result, 35 kilometers. Our second high has produced another genius. Yeah, I was holding my breath, but they finally reached the passing line. With 2 30-kilometer awakeners, this year's recruitment shouldn't be a problem. With these 2, that's enough. Several teachers chatted quietly while recording the scores. When they finally reached Qin Yi, they had already calmed down, holding little hope. An awakener who awakened a 1-kilometer planet was no different from an ordinary person. Even if the source power was converted into planetary energy, life could not emerge. Without life, there was naturally no planetary civilization. Awaken or no. 81 final result, 35 kilometers. The teacher recording the results glanced at the panel in front of Qin Yi, stated the number casually, and wrote it down. Then, he looked up, his eyes widening as he stared at the panel before Qin Yi. He rubbed his eyes. Impossible, this is... He had taught awakener studies for 10 years. Never had he seen a student who had awakened a 1-kilometer planet. Earth life on that planet. A miracle. This must be a miracle. Thighs. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Teacher Zhang, come look. Look. How many kilometers is that? Some teachers couldn't believe what they saw. Others were asking what Qin Yi's initial result had been. They confirmed, 1 kilometer. 35 kilometers. I am absolutely certain I didn't misread it. It's 35 kilometers. Oh heavens. Could Chaiching's second high be producing a favored child of heaven? Quick, report this immediately. In the principal's office. The principal was waiting for the final results to be submitted. He had already made predictions about this cohort of students, so he had a rough expectation for this result. Principal, great news, tremendous news. A student has awakened a 35-kilometer planet. Principal Lu shot up from his seat. What did you say? The entire school's top brass was stunned by this news. Qin Yi quietly watched the excited teachers around him, feeling a surge of excitement himself. Qin Yi, well done. Principal Lu stepped forward, speaking to Qin Yi very warmly. A 35-kilometer planet. Qin Yi's future was immeasurable. As the principal, he naturally needed to start cultivating this relationship right now. He wanted Qin Yi to have a good impression of second high, so that he might gain Qin Yi's support in the future. At that moment, the other students were also emerging from the awakening rooms. Some noticed the commotion. Huh, isn't that Qin Yi? Why is he surrounded by teachers? Look, even the principal is being polite to him. Could it be? There could only be one explanation for the principal to act. Standing in the crowd, a delicate and pretty young girl watched Qin Yi, who was surrounded by teachers and treated with such courtesy by the principal. A hint of approval and delight flickered in her eyes. By the way, what about that other genius with 35 kilometers? Principal Lu suddenly remembered there was another genius in this class. She's here. A teacher quickly parted the students and brought over the young girl, who stood out from the crowd like a crane among chickens, her bearing noble and elegant. Tang Fian walked over and said, Qin Yi, congratulations. Qin Yi hadn't expected that this class beauty, who usually seemed so aloof and otherworldly, would speak to him. Not for the 35-kilometer planet, but for that single greeting from Goddess Tang. Qin Yi, congratulations. Qin Yi smiled slightly and replied, thank you. Not for the 35-kilometer planet, but for that single greeting from Goddess Tang. Qin Yi, congratulations. Qin Yi smiled slightly and replied, thank you. Congratulations to you too. Principal Lu and the teachers looked at the two of them and felt they were a perfect match, like a golden boy and a jade girl. Today is a momentous day. Our second high is about to produce 3 awakeners with planets over 30 kilometers, and one of them is a favored child of heaven. The teachers burst into applause. Tang Fian glanced at Qin Yi, slightly curious about his final score. However, she didn't ask. After all, this matter would come to light sooner or later. Indeed, this is truly unexpected. I feel this event absolutely marks an epic-making moment in the history of planet awakening and Chaiching. From the initial 1 kilometer to the final 35 kilometers. This is simply a miracle. Boom. In an instant. It was as if a pot had exploded. Everyone in the hall now knew Qin Yi's final score. 35 kilometers. Just then, Principal Lu thought of something else and asked Qin Yi, by the way, Qin Yi, what level of planetary energy did you convert your source power into? This question silenced the scene instantly. The proctors also snapped back to their senses. Right. Awakener Qin Yi's initial planet was only 1 kilometer. So what level of planetary energy did he convert his source power into? And how did he manage to birth life? How do you explain this? Naturally, Qin Yi couldn't just reveal that he possessed a deduction system. After all, explaining it would only make things more troublesome. It might even make him a target for the higher-ups. He just wanted to lie low and develop his own technological civilization. Principal, I don't know either. When I first realized I had awakened a 1-kilometer planet, I was deeply disappointed. When the time came for the transformation of the source power, I just gave it a try. And then it succeeded. Qin Yi said, looking rather shy. Principal Lu was taken aback. As an experienced man, he felt Qin Yi wasn't telling the whole truth. However, he wasn't going to pry. No matter what. Qin Yi was the pride of No. 2 Chaiching High School. It seems this is the mark of monstrous talent, a true child of destiny. Principal Lu quickly spoke up, offering another word of praise. The other teachers also felt that must be the case. Otherwise, why would so many awakened ones with 1-kilometer planets fail to successfully transform their source power? Alright, Director Zhang, please arrange for these students to leave the awakening chamber. Make sure all the students are well taken care of. There's an enrollment meeting tomorrow, and we can't afford any disruptions. Director Zhang nodded hastily and replied, Yes, Principal, rest assured. We will calm the students down. Principal Lu then said to Qin Yi and Tang Fian, Come, let's talk in my office. They left the awakening. As they walked, Tang Fian asked softly, You still haven't said what planet energy you transformed into. Qin Yi shrugged, catching a faint, pleasant fragrance wafting from Tang Fian. He replied, You'll find out soon enough. Tang Fian glanced at the principal walking ahead and seemed to understand. The three arrived at the principal's office. Principal Lu brought out his treasured Malfong tea and brewed a pot. Come have some tea. After that, he sat down on the sofa beside Qin Yi. Now it's just the three of us here. Can you tell us what advanced planet energy you transformed into? Principal Lu assumed Qin Yi had awakened some high-tier energy. He thought it wasn't something to be disclosed in front of everyone, which was why he had brought Qin Yi to the office. He had also prepared 5,000 planet coins as a reward for Qin Yi and as a gesture of goodwill. Qin Yi took a sip of the Malfong tea, thinking to himself, what a fine tea this is. This was no ordinary Malfong. It was a specialty from the Immortal Mountains in the cultivation planet. As the principal of No. 2 Chaiching High School, he naturally had access to such expensive tea leaves. It's not advanced planet energy, Qin Yi replied calmly. Principal Lu was startled, then even more overjoyed. Then, is it super? If it were super, that would be extraordinary. He would be only the second awakened in Chaiching's history to possess super planet energy. No. 2 Chaiching High School would also rise to become a top-tier prestigious school. Thinking of this, Principal Lu was thrilled. It's not super. Qin Yi stated truthfully, which made Principal Lu freeze. He shuddered, nearly dropping his teacup. Fortunately, he managed to steady his emotions. Well, since it's intermediate energy, that's still decent. After all, your planet was only 1 kilometer when you first awakened. With more resources in the future, your achievements might not be that much lower. Qin Yi replied again, It's not intermediate energy. Tang Fian, sitting beside Qin Yi, noticed Principal Liu's expression. A slight smile curled at the corners of her mouth. This Qin Yi certainly has a bit of humor. Principal, the reason I didn't say it in front of everyone is because the planet energy I transformed is ordinary light energy. He didn't want to hide it. Nor did he want to lie. After all, the principal of No. 2 Chaiching High School, Lu Xingming, was a level 4 planet awakener. Lying in front of him would only lead to dire consequences when the truth came out. Lu Xingming was dumbfounded. Tang Fian, on the other hand, took a sip of her green tea, feeling this was within her expectations. When Qin Yi admitted his planet energy wasn't super or advanced, she had already figured it out. It had started as a mere 1-kilometer planet. If he could transform his source power into super or advanced energy, he wouldn't just be a child of destiny. He'd be the chosen one of fate itself. Having intended to win over this prodigy, Lu Xingming now realized it was no longer necessary. He also snapped out of his own stubbornness. Well, given your planet's current size, even with just light energy, if you get excellent resources later on, becoming an intermediate-level planet awakener isn't impossible. Yet in his heart he knew that for such an ordinary planet to level up, the resources required would be immense. Even the Shangwan family, the best clan in Chaiching, couldn't possibly feed it. Lu Xingming offered Qin Yi some words of comfort. Then he turned to Tang Fian and asked, Fian, what planet energy did you transform into? Tang Fian replied gracefully, Uncle Lu, it's an advanced energy dragon Qi. Planet energies are divided into several levels. The lowest tier is like Qin Yi's planet, ordinary and unremarkable. Then low-level energies include true Qi, supernatural powers, vital Qi, innate Qi, telekinesis, and so on. Intermediate-level energies include battle Qi, soul power, martial spirits, yuan Qi, ghost Qi, and so on. Advanced energies include spiritual energy, dragon Qi, primordial Qi, demonic Qi, magic, and so on. Super energies include divine power, Hongmeng. Principal Lu finally felt a sense of relief with Tang Fian. Thankfully, he still had 2 awakened ones with advanced planet energy. Well, with your talent and resources, you're sure to become a top-tier awakener in Chaiching. Lu Xingming let out a sigh and brought out the prepared 5,000 planet coins. This is a small token. Please accept it. You'll need plenty of resources in the future. As long as you have perseverance, success isn't impossible. After all, even a 1-kilometer planet managed to successfully transform its source power. A miracle has already happened to you once. I believe it will happen many more times. Listening to the principal's words of encouragement, Qin Yi looked at the gold card on the table. Then he looked at the principal, deeply moved. Principal, thank you. I will be proud of No. 2 High School. But one day I will make No. 2 High School proud of me. Principal Lu was stunned. He hadn't expected Qin Yi to say such words. He suddenly felt his efforts had been worthwhile. Leaving the principal's office and walking along the tree-lined path of the school, Tang Fian tried several times to speak, but held back. She was weighing whether it was worth trying to recruit such an awakener. Until when Qin Yi was about to enter the boys' dorm, she finally spoke up. Qin Yi, would you be willing to join Tianyu Corporation? Tang Fian, the cherished daughter of Tang Yi, chairman of Tianyu Corporation in Car City. Qin Yi had long heard of her and understood exactly why she wanted him to join the company. After awakening their planets, awakened ones typically entered various corporations, essentially working for capital. These capitalists were themselves highly advanced awakened beings. They needed precious resources to elevate their own planets and strive to become the strongest. An awakened like Qin Yi might end up at a small company barely scraping by, but to truly enhance his strength, as Lu Xingming had said, required an immense amount of resources. Qin Yi didn't have that kind of wealth, but he had the system. And the reason Tang Fian made this offer was likely because Qin Yi had created the miracle of a 1-kilometer planet. Like Lu Xingming, she was betting on Qin Yi, wondering if he could make a miracle happen again. No thanks, Qin Yi said with a smile. I appreciate the offer, but I've already been blessed by heaven's fortune. From now on, I'll just live a simple, ordinary life. The goddess was alluring, yet also pragmatic. Qin Yi wasn't the type to be dazzled by a girl like Tang Fian. Now that he had the system, his path to power would be unique and rapid, inevitably drawing unwanted attention. Besides, she wasn't genuinely interested in him. Qin Yi turned and entered the boys' dormitory. Tang Fian dropped her elegant demeanor and reverted to her usual aloofness. She raised her hand, her ring gleaming faintly, as a jade slip materialized in her palm. She sent a message to the officials relaying the day's awakening results from No. 2 High School. Back in the dorm, Qin Yi was immediately surrounded by his roommates. Look at you. You've shot up in the world without a word. Yeah, and you've even won the favor of the goddess Tang. Qin Yi, congratulations. Huh. Zheng Ming patted Qin Yi on the shoulder. Tell us, did the goddess Tang just offer you a spot at Tianyu Corporation? The moment he spoke, the entire dorm fell silent. Tianyu Corporation, the most renowned planet owner investment firm in Car City. Yeah, but I turned it down, Qin Yi replied directly. Everyone froze, staring at Qin Yi in disbelief. Had refused. Unbelievable. Someone had actually turned down the goddess Tang's invitation. They wished they could swap places with Qin Yi in an instant and eagerly accept her offer. Good call, Zheng Ming said, though inwardly he too wished he could take his place. But as a friend, he genuinely thought Qin Yi had done well. You're the pride of Car City now. You could aim for Jiang City, maybe even a spot in the top 500 companies of the Great Yin Empire. However, Qin Yi had his own plans. The 8 of them shared a farewell meal in the cafeteria before returning to the dorm. The 4 awakened students began to manage the planets within their bodies while the unawakened roommates packed their bags and left the school. Tomorrow's enrollment fair had nothing to do with them anymore. As for farewells, they didn't exist here. Qin Yi stared at the panel before him. He asked inwardly, System, how do I accelerate evolution time again? System Patoin. System time decelerator 1-0 planet coins. This wasn't some great Dao deduction system. It was a great Dao Patoin system. Qin Yi grumbled as he selected the purchase. Fortunately, the principal was a generous one. Head gifted Qin Yi 5-0 planet coins as support. For a freshly awakened individual, managing a planet meant merely sustaining the few surviving organisms, keeping them from perishing in the harsh environment. To truly walk the path of a planet lord, one needed the assistance of a professional planet management team equipped with vast experience and abundant resources. For instance, they could provide the primal essence to convert into planetary energy. Thus, after awakening, one had to choose suitable partners. The higher the planet's energy level, the greater the autonomy of choice. Fortunately, Qin Yi possessed a Patoan system. Meanwhile, outside, as the awakening day concluded across Car City's schools, all the results were made public. Is No. 2 High School trying to defy the heavens? A 35-kilometer awakener. This year's top score at No. 1 High School was only 34 km. It's enough to make anyone green with envy. At the Car City Awakeners Guild, President Tong Bailey was on the phone with Principal Lu of No. 2 High School. It's been a while since we last met. Do you have time for a meal, Principal? Principal Lu replied. You know the school is swamped these 2 days. Let's skip the meal. Tong Bailey gazed at the vast expanse outside. I recently acquired a magic crystal. You've shown me much kindness over the years and I'd like to express my gratitude. Principal Lu paused, then sighed, a hint of regret in his voice. I know what you're after, but I'll be frank with you. Lu Xingming then laid out Qin Yi's basic situation in full. Tong Bailey frowned slightly. Around him were several assistants and deduction masters. They immediately ran a simulation based on Principal Liu's account. They found that a 1-kilometer planet could never give rise to life. Even converting it to the lowest form of light energy wouldn't yield a high success rate. But if this is true, Qin Yi might possess something extraordinary, or perhaps he truly is a miracle. I trust our tests are flawless. The facts are as I've stated. The choice is yours. Lu Xingming concealed nothing from Tong Bailey, nor could he. He received several similar calls, all inquiring about Qin Yi's results and the background of this prodigy who had suddenly emerged at No. 2 high school. They wanted to know the grade of Qin Yi's planetary energy conversion so they could prepare early and poach him at the enrollment. Turning off his phone, Lu Xingming watched the unawakened students leaving the campus. I hope a miracle truly can happen. The second major crossroads in the lives of awakened individuals was fast approaching. Qin Yi remained focused on observing the evolution on his planet. He had to admit paying to win was truly something. Using the time accelerator for the second time, Qin Yi realized that the faster the set time flow, the shorter the accelerator's duration. His planet had now reached the Cambrian period. For safety's sake, he opted to extend the duration. On the planet, time was once again accelerated. Single-celled organisms became a thing of the past in this phase of evolution. The formation and proliferation of multicellular life began to explode, following the historical divisions of Earth in his past life. The course of life's genesis could be divided into 4 eons. The Hadean Eon 3, 8 billion years ago devoid of life. The Archean Eon 2, 5 billion years ago single-celled organisms. The Proterozoic Eon 570 million years ago multicellular organisms. The Phanerozoic Eon to the present diverse life forms. The first time accelerator had taken 38 minutes to evolve from the Hadean to the Archean Eon. Now, after a night of relentless effort and evolution, the planet's timeline had reached the Cambrian period. The first great explosion of life had arrived. Qin Yi's planet's diameter expanded once more. Qin Yi, wake up. We're going to be late. Zheng Ming urged urgently. Qin Yi had managed his planet late into the night. In truth, the other students in his dormitory had also stayed up just as late, one to solidify their own planets during this crucial time. Another newly awakened to their planet was simply too overwhelmed with excitement. Qin Yi was dragged along by Zheng Ming, who bore the same dark circles under his eyes until they reached the square. Their counselor was already waiting there. Upon seeing Qin Yi, he spoke. Qin Yi, over here. You don't need to attend this recruitment fair. Follow me. The principal and the others are waiting for you. Seeing this, Zheng Ming was filled with envy. Qin Yi, go on. Make a good impression. With that, he headed to his own class and found an empty seat. Qin Yi, meanwhile, followed the counselor to the principal's office. Before they even entered, the sound of Principal Liu's hearty laughter echoed from within. As Qin Yi entered the office with the counselor, he saw several influential figures seated with numerous assistants in suits standing nearby. Our star has arrived. Principal Liu beckoned enthusiastically. Classmate Qin Yi, come over here. This young man is the pride of our second high school this year, an awakener with a 35-kilometer planet. As he said this, he seemed to swell with pride for Qin Yi. Qin Yi, however, had not anticipated this. He had already confessed that his planet's energy was the most basic light energy, and he wasn't even a martial artist. Yet Principal Liu had still orchestrated this spectacle. Everyone to nurture life from a mere 1-kilometer planet is unprecedented in the history of awakeners. It's a miracle. Although it's just ordinary planet energy with such rapid diameter growth, it's bound to have tremendous development prospects in the future. I believe in this miracle, Lu Xingming declared with conviction. At that moment, many eyes were fixed on Qin Yi. Their gazes made him feel utterly transparent, as if his very soul were laid bare. Qin Yi, I am Tong Bailey, the president of the Chaiqing Awakened Union. Regarding your situation, Principal Liu has explained everything. I am willing to offer you a chance to improve yourself. Join my union, and I will provide you with certain resources. Tong Bailey was the first to speak while the others remained silent. Qin Yi's situation was peculiar. His planet had converted to the most basic light energy, although it had birthed life and its diameter seemed impressive, befitting a prodigy. In reality, it was no different from any ordinary planet. Such a planet would be incredibly difficult to upgrade and unlikely to yield any profit for them. As for Principal Liu's talk of potential, they cared little for it. What they wanted were tangible, immediate gains. President Tong, I am merely an ordinary planet awakener. I am unworthy of such high regard from you. Thank you for your kindness. Tong Bailey said no more. Qin Yi's words were clearly a refusal. Principal Liu felt a pang of regret. Tong Bailey's offer signified he valued Qin Yi's talent. But Qin Yi had turned him down. Would anyone else even bother to speak up now? Yet Qin Yi then asked Tong Bailey, President, I know my planet's awakening is somewhat unique. A 1-kilometer planet that can give birth to life. It seems like a miracle, but reality isn't full of miracles at every turn. So, I don't want to bear the consequences of what happens if that miracle fades. I am after all quite timid. I wish to become a non-staff member of the Awakened Union, earning points by taking on quests to exchange for resources. A glint of appreciation shone in Tong Bailey's eyes as he raised his hand and applauded. Clap, clap. Good. The Union's doors are always open to you. He'll let them know. For an 18-year-old to remain so composed and unflappable at this moment is a rare quality. Your future achievements are sure to be significant. I, Tong Bailey, have high hopes for you. My Union's doors will always be open for you. Principal Lu, standing beside Qin Yi, hadn't expected that after all his effort to keep these people here to see Qin Yi, the boy would directly refuse the invitation from the president of the Chaiching Awakened Union. He felt a deep sense of disappointment and thought Qin Yi was a bit too young and arrogant. But he had already started investing in him. He was determined to recoup his costs. Principal Lu quickly interjected with some placating words. Ah, that's the spirit. I wouldn't call it calmness, really. I think it's more like youthful vigor. Ha! The other bigwigs seated there, however, subtly shook their heads. For an ordinary planet awakener to try and become strong by taking on quests and gathering resources independently, the success rate was akin to a 1-kilometer planet birthing life. In this world, talent and strength reigned supreme. By refusing Tong Bailey and opting to take quests alone, Qin Yi had likely made it even harder for himself to become a powerhouse. Principal Lu gestured for the counselor to escort Qin Yi out. The recruitment fair was just beginning. Outside the principal's office, the counselor said with a hint of regret, I didn't expect you to refuse President Tong. The principal worked hard to keep them here to pave a path for you. Work hard, and heaven will not disappoint the diligent. Qin Yi nodded and said, Thank you, Teacher Zhang. I will strive to become stronger. These capitalists with connections had all learned of Qin Yi's basic situation from Principal Lu. Those without connections naturally knew they stood no chance. Knowing Qin Yi was just an ordinary planet awakener, they dismissed this minor miracle. Those who did see its value were refused by Qin Yi. Back in the dormitory, Qin Yi once again used the 5 individual planet coins provided by Principal Lu to start spending on enhancements. Joining a union would indeed grant access to many resources. However, upon joining, Qin Yi would have to sign an agreement. Given his current level, what Tong Bailey would offer would undoubtedly be an indentured contract. For the rest of his life, Qin Yi would be branded as a member of the Chaiching Awakened Union, effectively working for the union's higher-ups like Tong Bailey. And it would be for life. But with the great Tao derivation system, Qin Yi had no intention of becoming a lifelong wage slave. Spend to grow stronger. That was Qin Yi's only choice now. He exchanged for a time accelerator. The flow of time on his planet sped up once more. Arthropods and vertebrates. They had only existed on the planet for a mere minute before ferns began to appear. Then in the oceans, vertebrates emerged. The end of the Cambrian period had arrived. Under the system's control, there were no meteor impacts or volcanic eruptions. Thus, no mass extinction events occurred. All creatures evolved naturally from birth to prosperity, and from prosperity to being replaced by new species. A cycle of endless life. Soon, with the acceleration of 2-time accelerators, the planet entered a new era. The Jurassic. Qin Yi didn't want to waste his energy on naming. He simply used the same names from his past life on Earth. The Cambrian period came to an end. The Jurassic period arrived. The species on the planet once again experienced a massive explosion. The age of dinosaurs had come, and the planet's diameter grew even larger once more. The diameter of his past live's planet was roughly 10,000 kilometers. Now Qin Yi's planet had already reached 85.3 kilometers. It could be said that this was truly a case of winning by quantity. If Principal Lu and those capitalists knew about Qin Yi's situation, they would surely be fighting over him. Why? Because in just 2 short days, going from 1 kilometer to 80 kilometers was something never before seen in the history of Awakened. Even those true geniuses who awakened with a 50-kilometer planet would need to increase their planet's diameter. It took them about a month, even with the continuous conversion of origin power, the birth of life, and then the reproduction of life. After all, the time flow on all Awakened's planets was the same as in reality. In the later stages, to birth more life, meaning humans, it requires 10 months of pregnancy. But what about Qin Yi? He had the system. This was also why he didn't. The tree that stands out in the forest is the first to be felled by the wind. The Jurassic was considered one of the most famous eras on Earth in his past life because of the dinosaurs that appeared during this period. Those tall, mighty, and ferocious giant beasts. Qin Yi was looking forward to this. First plants suitable for dinosaurs began to emerge. Under the effect of photosynthesis and accelerated by the time accelerator, they began to grow at a relatively fast pace. Then herbivorous dinosaurs appeared. The small furtatans hatched. Perhaps because the planet's diameter was too small, the dinosaurs that emerged weren't particularly tall or mighty and were predominantly very small herbivorous species. It wasn't until the 3rd time accelerator ended that some small carnivorous dinosaurs appeared. Their numbers were not very large. Qin Yi counted them. All the carnivorous dinosaurs combined totaled around 2,000. Should I use the dinosaurs as my weapons, or continue accelerating until humans appear then establish a nation and army? Qin Yi sat on his bed pondering. He only had the 500,000 planet coins gifted by Principal Liu and had already used 300,000 to accelerate the planet's evolution. Now he only had 2 chances left. Based on time comparisons, these 2 uses could indeed push the evolution from the Jurassic to the Phanerozoic and the birth of humanity. However, if the evolution ended and humanity was still in a primitive state, then he would truly have to wait until the humans on his planet developed to the point of establishing a nation. Systems simulate the effect of using the time accelerator 2 more times. System: humanity is born, dinosaurs go extinct, tribes form, tribal wars occur, nations are established. Seeing the system's answer, Qin Yi stroked his chin in thought. He decided not to use the time accelerator for now. The small carnivorous dinosaurs were not weak. He wanted to use this opportunity to save up enough planet coins for the next time acceleration. To earn money, the natural place to go was the Awakened Union. He could take on missions there. Typical missions involved plundering the origin power of unowned planets. Planet masters weren't immortal. They also faced death, whether from old age or being killed by others. The planets within them would then enter the Dead Star Sea. That was another dimension where planets went after a planet master died. Awakened individuals in reality needed to plunder the origin power of these unowned planets to enhance themselves. The higher the planet's rank, the more advanced and powerful its origin power. This was also why Qin Yi had to make a choice between dinosaurs and humans. He now needed to use the existing resources on his planet to participate in a raid, then exchange the origin power for planet coins to spend on the system. Noon arrived, and the morning's recruitment fair came to an end. Students with high planet energy levels had the power to choose which company to join. These companies would offer them very lucrative contracts. Students with lower planet energy levels could only pick the best among the smaller companies. But their contracts couldn't compare to those of high-level Awakened. The biggest difference lay in resources. Damn, I actually got into Tianyu Company. I didn't even expect it myself. Zheng Ming's voice echoed into the dorm before he even entered. The other roommates, however, looked somewhat dejected and downcast. They each began packing their belongings. They had to report to their companies in the afternoon and eventually form teams to enter the Dead Star Sea, helping their companies plunder resources and origin power from unknown planets. Qin Yi, I've got great news. I signed a contract with Tianyu Company. I thought my 21-kilometer planet wouldn't be valued. Unexpectedly, Tianyu lowered their passing score quite a bit this year. 20 kilometers is enough to get in. Zheng Ming was extremely excited. Qin Yi was happy for his friend's good result. Congratulations. Zheng Ming shrugged and sat on Qin Yi. You're way too calm. By the way, what was your final result? The other roommates quickly looked over when they heard Zheng Ming ask Qin Yi. After all, Qin Yi was only the second person since the founding of No. 2 High School to awaken a planet exceeding 30 kilometers. He could be considered a prodigy. You'll know in the future. Zheng Ming found it boring. TCH, acting like I care. Fine, don't tell me then. He figured it was probably a secret and quickly covered for Qin Yi. After the other roommates had left, Zheng Ming said to Qin Yi, with talent like yours, you'll likely end up in Hanxing. Who knows when we'll meet again. Brother, take care of yourself out there. Zheng Ming suddenly felt a wave of melancholy. Over these 3 years, they had been intensely learning all about Awakened. From the awakening of planets to converting origin power, birthing life, managing the planet, and the development and enhancement of various planetary energies. Plundering unowned planets, the differences and cooperation between civilizations from different planets, and the history of Awakened. All in all, these 3 years felt to Qin Yi like reliving his senior year of high school in his past life. It was a unique culture of this world. Everyone was striving for their own future. As for friendships, unless there was a true meeting of minds otherwise. Like now, the other roommates left without much fanfare because their planetary civilizations were relatively low. In the future, they would just become employees of small companies. Their futures were easily foreseeable. They wouldn't harbor grand ambitions. They silently packed their bags and silently left, silently becoming dust in this world. Zheng Ming and Qin Yi both packed their belongings. In a few days, this would be the dorm for the next batch of students. Farewell. The road ahead is long. We part ways here. The mountains are high and the waters are long. Until we meet again. Zheng Ming left with the Tianyu Company team to report to the headquarters of Tianyu, one of the top 10 awakened companies in Shay City. Qin Yi took his luggage, boarded a magic carriage, and returned to the long-unseen Wuyi factory district. 3 years ago, he had transmigrated here right when the original owner of this body was facing a life-altering catastrophe. His parents had died in a car accident. The original owner had stopped eating and drinking from the shock until Qin Yi arrived. He tidied up the house a bit. He continued to manage the planet within him. 3 days later, he would go to the Awakened Union to take on missions. If he could, Qin Yi would choose to lie low. That way, the rapid expansion of his planet wouldn't draw unwanted attention. Being noticed by capitalists and more powerful figures was never a good thing. Signing a contract with them meant binding oneself to an unbreakable pact. Once bound, betrayal was impossible. Breaking the contract would demand a terrible price, even death, without the authorities holding the company accountable. However, Qin Yi needed planet coins to grow stronger. Taking on guild missions to plunder the source power of unowned planets was the only way to earn a substantial income. As for working a regular job, with his current strength, it would take years to save a mere 100,000 planet coin. In this world, an ordinary person's life could be fleeting. Even a low-level awakener could accomplish what they could only dream of. Ordinary people. There were plenty on the planets governed by lords. After stocking up on supplies for a few days, Qin Yi stayed in his small room observing and managing the planet within him. After all, this planet had evolved through time acceleration. Its diameter was minuscule and comparable to the Earth of his past life. He had to be extremely careful to prevent chaos or accidents among the current species. The key was to ensure the success of the upcoming raid on an unowned planet. According to the system's calculations, using the time accelerator could advance the planet to the era of human nature. However, ordinary humans were still too weak. The most basic unowned planets were level 2, inhabited by martial artists, cultivators, espers, and psychics. Though the planet lord was dead, the planet itself remained, and time continued its normal flow. The native inhabitants would develop and cultivate as usual, until one day a new planet lord would invade, plundering the source power of the unowned planet, bringing calamity upon its natives. Of course, if the planet lord was unlucky and encountered an unowned planet with a being more powerful than his own world, the tables would turn. That would be a reverse plunder. This was precisely why Qin Yi insisted on taking on a mission during the Age of Dawn. 3 days later, Qin Yi took a transit boat directly to the Awakeners Guild in Chase City. The transit boat originated from a cultivation civilization planet. For 10 planet coins, he could instantly travel from his Wuyichang district home to the guild. It was also the only way to enter the guild. Of course, those with status were exempt. Upon arrival, he saw the grand and spacious hall bustling with people. Qin Yi found the registration desk. "Hello, I'm new here and would like to register." The receptionist, with a delicate and dignified appearance, offered a gentle smile. "Please wait a moment." An identity scan instantly displayed Qin Yi's information. Of course, as long as he didn't reveal his planet's panel. No one would know that his planet's diameter had already reached 100 kilometers. "Mr. Qin, hello. Our president issued a notice 3 days ago. If you come to register, all fees will be waived. Moreover, you can use the VIP channel. Please wait, Mr. Qin. A dedicated assistant will be with you shortly." Hearing the receptionist's crisp voice, Qin Yi sighed, feeling a grudging respect for Tong Bailey. He knew Qin Yi's planet was merely an ordinary energy planet. Yet, as the guild's president, he wouldn't give up on even 0.9 million chance. For him, it was just a small favor. But for Qin Yi, it was a debt of gratitude. Sooner or later, it would have to be repaid. This was the principle behind the rich getting richer. They had abundant resources to invest in various ventures. One of those investments would yield tremendous returns. "Mr. Qin, hello. My name is Li Xiaoya. I will be your dedicated liaison at the guild." A moment later, a tall, beautiful woman in a business suit approached Qin Yi and greeted him politely. "Hello, I'd like to take on a mission. What should I do?" Li Xiaoya gestured for him to follow her. "Mr. Qin, since you've just awakened your planet, taking on missions might be challenging. However, the president has instructed us to provide you with the utmost assistance. A few very low-level unknown planets have appeared today. You might want to consider one of them." They crossed the hall and entered a private booth. Li Xiaoya produced a jade slip and a projection appeared showing several planets of different colors. The colors represented different energy levels, though all were quite low and suitable for beginners. "Are there any martial artist planets?" Qin Yi asked. Li Xiaoya pointed at the projection. "Yes, this one." Qin Yi said, "That one then." Li Xiaoya put away the jade slip and said politely, "Please follow me, Mr. Qin. To enter the Dead Star Sea, we need to take a special vehicle." The Dead Star Sea was originally the resting place for planets after their lords perished. Later, it was unlocked by Super Awakener using supreme power. Subsequently, Awakener from various factions developed it until the authorities stepped in to regulate it. Now for 3 million planet coins, one could purchase a starship to travel there, giving rise to numerous large and small companies. They used various means to plunder the source power and resources of unknown planets within the Dead Star Sea. Qin Yi followed Li Xiaoya into a special elevator ascending to the guild's upper levels. Many starships were docked here, divided into 3 tiers leading to 3 different zones of the Dead Star Sea. "Mr. Qin, I wish you a victorious start." Before he boarded the starship, Li Xiaoya smiled once more and said politely. Qin Yi replied, "Thank you." The starship's door closed. A flash of white light, and he was in a chaotic void. It felt like floating in space, surrounded by unowned planets of various sizes and colors. He stood on a dusty yellow planet. As far as the eye could see, there was only desert. It looked barren, and yet some martial artists managed to survive in such an environment. Survival of the fittest. He could already see. Without hesitation, he activated the planet chain bridge connecting the 2 worlds. He urged the small carnivorous dinosaurs which were hunting to cross over to this unowned planet. These dinosaurs originally from grasslands or shrublands became restless in the desert. Qin Yi had also starved them for a day. Seeing the martial artists, they saw food. With roars and screeches, the small carnivorous dinosaurs charged. They began chasing their prey. The martial artists on this planet, seeing these sudden monsters, immediately engaged. They too saw the same opportunity. Delicious food was right before their eyes. The planet's master perished, unable to provide the planet with its primordial power. Without it, the small planet alone could not sustain itself. Naturally, it could no longer develop. Spiritual energy grew thin. Warriors dwindled. They turned on each other for resources, only to find them depleting. Forced to unite, they began a harsh struggle for survival. They forgot their language, forgot their cultivation. Only the instinct to live remained. Even when they encountered monsters like dinosaurs, they saw them only as food. With a shout, the warrior in the lead, letting out a roar, he leaped high and slammed down onto a dinosaur. With a heavy thud, the formidable Longosaurus was crushed to the ground, twitched, and died. The warrior suffered only broken arms. Ignoring his injuries, he tore into the Gasosaurus' neck he ripped off a chunk of flesh. Just as he was about to feast, another Gasosaurus snatched him up, and yet another. One bit his head, the other his leg. With a violent twist, he was torn apart. The other dozen warriors, though starving, held their ground. Their instincts screamed that these towering swift beasts were formidable and dangerous. They did not lose their. Instinctively, they formed small teams, relying on their iron-hard bodies and warrior chi to hunt down many Gasosaurs. Yet this dinosaur army was not composed solely of Gasosaurs. There were Pangoraptors, Dandoraptors, Jurassic hunters, and the airborne Ichi, raptors like the Velociraptor. Several small carnivorous dinosaurs from the Jurassic period were born on the tiny planet within Qin Yi. These small dinosaurs were incredibly fast and hunted in packs. As a united army, their power was not to be underestimated. The dozen or so warriors in this desert faced over 1,000 dinosaurs. No matter how strong they were, they couldn't overcome their own hunger, let alone the swift and equally famished dinosaurs. In just a few minutes, the warriors fell one by one, devoured by the dinosaurs. This was an unowned planet 100 kilometers in diameter. When all life on the planet is extinguished, it automatically transforms, slowly reverting into primordial power. This power then becomes the strange energy of the Dead Star Sea. To this day, no one has been able to harness the strange energy of the Dead Star Sea. Not even the first planet master to awaken their planet. After a century of exploration, he found the purple energy, the transformed primordial power in the Dead Star Sea, utterly incomprehensible. As the dinosaurs began to hunt across the land, the number of warriors on the planet dwindled and the planet's diameter visibly shrank. Qin Yi released several hundred more dinosaurs. On a distant dune, the strongest warrior of this unowned planet was still leading a desperate resistance. This place was the planet's last oasis. The strongest warrior's fists were wreathed in chi. One punch could fell a dinosaur. To replenish his energy, he seized the chance to drink the dinosaur's blood, fueling his continued fight. This was the final struggle of the unowned planet's primordial power. One could call it the will of heaven and earth on this unowned planet. Qin Yi immediately sent a signal to the dinosaurs elsewhere, commanding them to converge and face this strongest warrior together. The strongest warrior knew he was at the end of his rope. Around him, his comrades fell one by one, becoming food for the beasts. He held on with sheer willpower and his remaining chi. But alas, the unowned planet was shrinking and the spiritual energy was becoming even thinner. Every bit used was a bit lost. Of the nearly 2,000 dinosaurs, over half were dead or wounded. Yet the remaining 1,000 were so pressed on. They were looking for an opening, a chance to kill this strongest warrior. The warrior could no longer sense the world's spiritual energy. He panted heavily. Finally, he looked up and let out a roar of utter defiance that echoed across the heavens and the earth. He self-destructed his dantian. A thunderous explosion. The dinosaurs surrounding him were blasted into bloody mist. Of the 1,000+, only about 400 remained. Qin Yi had been watching from afar. Seeing this, he was glad he hadn't gotten closer. He also felt a pang of cruelty witnessing such a planetary war. But to survive in this world and become strong, he had to keep plundering. The strongest warrior's self-destruct marked the death of the planet's strongest life. The planet began to shrink faster, eventually reverting to its primordial power. However, this primordial power was different from the one from the awakening day. This trace was a dusty yellow color. It wasn't the pure primordial power of before. Awakened ones could buy it to enhance their own planet's level. This was the power born from a warrior's planet. Naturally, it was suited for warriors. It was initially low-grade planetary energy. But when an awakened one absorbs enough of this warrior-specific power, the planetary energy would be elevated, from low-grade chi to high-grade prana, and ultimately to super-divine power. It even began to possess its own consciousness. The moment it transformed into primordial power, it tried to escape. Fortunately, Qin Yi was quick. He grabbed an obsidian stone and hurled it. The obsidian instantly absorbed the yellow trace of primordial power, sealing it within. With that, the mission to plunder the planet was complete. As for the remaining dinosaurs, they returned to the planet within Qin Yi via the chain bridge. The guild starship only allowed Qin Yi to be on this unowned planet. Beyond this planet, there were many other unowned planets of various sizes, but Qin Yi couldn't reach them, though they appeared close. Qin Yi was just an ordinary person now. He existed only within this planet's spacetime. He took out the starship controller and returned directly to the ship. "Welcome back, Mr. Qin." Li Xiaoya was already waiting. Qin Yi handed over the obsidian. After inspecting it, she said, "Please wait a moment, Mr. Qin. They'll have the results shortly." Qin Yi nodded and followed her to the lounge. Enjoying fine desserts and diluted spiritual spring water, the fatigue from the starship's journey through the Dead Star Sea and the planet plunder vanished completely. This was the real life. Soon after, Li Xiaoya returned with a card, offering it with both hands. "Mr. Qin, the quality of this primordial power is quite good. It's valued at 3000 planet coins. I've arranged an exclusive golden card for you, usable at all shops in Che City." Qin Yi put the card away. He then left the guild. With these planet coins, he could splurge on upgrades again. At the top of the guild, Tong Bailey listened to Li Xiaoya's report. He fell into deep thought. Even his data analysts couldn't figure out how Qin Yi had done it. In just a few, he's already plundering planets. Truly surprising. No wonder he didn't want to join the guild. Tong Bailey muttered to himself, then turned to Li Xiaoya. "From now on, you are Qin Yi's exclusive liaison. Your other awakened ones will be assigned to someone else. Your base salary is raised to the intermediate level. Report all of Qin Yi's guild mission results to me. Also, don't pry into his affairs. I appreciate people who can keep secrets. Do you understand?" Li Xiaoya immediately replied, "Xiaoya understands." Qin Yi, who had left the guild, knew nothing of this. Yet he was aware that Tong Bailey would inevitably notice him. There was no helping it. Next time, he should find another place to plunder. He couldn't rely solely on the guild's channel. Fortunately, the starship only had warp capabilities, not surveillance functions. If Tong Bailey had witnessed Qin Yi using dinosaurs to plunder an uninhabited planet, he would surely have been astounded. Not only that, but he would have treated Qin Yi as an honored guest. In this world, due to the existence of awakened ones, there were all sorts of bizarre creatures. There were various spiritual beasts, magical beasts, immortal beasts, soul beasts, and even magical creatures from planets of sorcery. However, dinosaurs were creatures long vanished from the annals of history. If he were to reveal them, he guessed that those hunters would be quite pleased. Even those high-level awakened with peculiar tastes who had tasted the flesh of many beasts had probably never savored dinosaur meat. Of course, Qin Yi had considered this himself. Truly bringing out dinosaurs might net him a considerable number of planetary coins. However, it would also expose his planet's evolutionary abilities. Without complete self-protection or absolute strength as a guarantee, he opted for a safer approach. He returned to his small hut. He exchanged for a time accelerator and began acceleration at a 1:1 time ratio. The sudden loss of over 1,000 small carnivorous dinosaurs was a boon for the herbivores that originally inhabited this planet. They no longer had too many natural predators. The living space that had been pushed to its limits suddenly expanded. Now, with the time accelerator, they rapidly bred a wave in a short period. This led to a decrease in the planet's vegetation, causing some small, long-necked brachiosaurs that struggled to find food to quickly go extinct. Then other smaller dinosaurs emerged. Some flying creatures also came into being. As food on land became scarce, some dinosaurs began to venture into the oceans. Amphibious creatures appeared. The planet's diameter increased once again. The Jurassic period slowly passed. Planet civilization, Jurassic civilization, planet level 1, planet diameter 130 kilometers, planet species 22163. Evolution, route, time acceleration, natural selection. Then came the Cretaceous period. The temperature rose slightly and plants became more luxuriant. Some insects also emerged. Mosquitoes, for instance. The planet's species count increased once more due to the birth of insects. The planet's diameter grew again. In just a few short days, Qin Yi, through sheer spending, had boosted his planet's diameter to nearly 150 kilometers. If other awakened were to learn of this, they would all kneel in awe. Even the prodigy Tang Fian, with the best resources from the Tang group, had only managed to increase her planet from the initial 30-plus kilometers to a little over 130 kilometers. This was despite the Tang group spending a fortune. They had purchased primal forces containing dragon chi from the market to boost Tang Fian's planet energy, successfully nurturing several ancestral dragons. One could only imagine how powerful the system's time accelerator was as a cheat. As the planet's evolution reached the late Cretaceous period, the time accelerator ran out. Of the 5000 planetary coins gifted by Principal Lu 400 had been used, Qin Yi still had over 4000 planetary coins in hand. That meant 4 more chances. Continue acceleration. Dinosaurs were powerful, but to create more species on this planet, And to build a technological civilization, he had to abandon this dinosaur era. He couldn't rely on dinosaurs to plunder resources forever. Besides, the dinosaurs on the planet now were mostly small carnivores. Their variety had diminished. Only the velociraptors could hold their own in a fight. But Qin Yi couldn't guarantee what the next planet would be like. If it turned out to be a planet of martial artists, especially stronger ones, dinosaurs like the velociraptors would lose. He had to continue the evolution. Once humans appeared and established nations with one final acceleration, he could grant them more knowledge to forge firearms. With firearms, dealing with martial artists would be much easier. In the early Cretaceous, plant communities dominated by gymnosperms were still lush, but the appearance of angiosperms was another significant event in plant evolutionary history. The Cretaceous saw the rise of reliable early angiosperms. Angiosperm groups that persist to this day, such as magnolias, willows, maples, poplars, birches, and palms, spread across the Earth's surface. Angiosperms provided abundant food for certain animals, such as insects, birds, and mammals, enabling them to thrive. This was an era transitioning from the Jurassic to the Paleogene. During this period, dinosaurs either evolved into other species or faced self-extinction. Take crocodiles, for instance. Their ancestors were dinosaurs, but to adapt to the planet's climatic and geological changes, they eventually became crocodiles. And from the Cretaceous to the Paleogene, the most important evolution was the formation of coal, oil, and natural gas. After prolonged crustal movements and the natural demise of the dinosaur era, the organisms and vegetation born in the Jurassic and Cretaceous were buried deep underground, where due to temperature, they began to react and transform. This would become the planet's primary source of power for its early development. Watching the planet's species grow more numerous, encompassing nearly all major taxonomic categories. Only the final step of evolution remained the appearance of humans. Qin Yi purchased another time accelerator. As time flowed on, the ancestor of humanity, the ape-man, appeared. This was considered humanity's first ancestor. It suddenly began to walk upright. Then step-by-step evolution continued. More ape-men emerged: Dryopithecus, Australopithecus, Pliohyrax, and so on. These ape-men, through their evolution, slowly learned to use simple tools. They formed their own territories, becoming social species. They hunted together, developed leader consciousness, and used tools like wooden sticks. Until the first ape-man cut his hand on a sharp stone, marking humanity's entry into the Paleolithic era. At this point, half the evolution time had passed. Since humans were the foundation for the technological civilization Qin Yi wanted to build, he had to be cautious. Relying on supplies, he passed a day. The planet's diameter had reached 180 kilometers. And on the planet, the first true human had appeared. The Neogene period arrived. After finishing his nutrients, Qin Yi exchanged for another time accelerator. Humans began to venture out of the lush forests. They started consciously expanding their territories, seeking better and more delicious food. With increased reproduction, humans became the most powerful species on the planet. Even formidable beasts fell to human hunters. They used more and more tools and simple writing and language. As territories expanded, friction began to arise between different territories. To seize greater resources, to own more land. For the tribe, a chief led the men, women, and children of his territory to attack another. They possessed relatively advanced stone tools. Coupled with their extensive combat experience from constantly fighting off beasts, and their strong physiques from a diet of wild game, the people of the other territory, due to food scarcity, were not as tall or robust and lacked significant combat experience. They were quickly conquered. Having tasted the sweetness of invading other territories for the first time, this chief began conquering far and wide, establishing a powerful tribe. This was the formation of tribes. Eventually, with the emergence of tribal consciousness, over a dozen tribes on the planet warred with each other. Ultimately, a great river became the dividing line. North of the river, there was a tribe that had built its territory on a hill. South of the river, there was a tribe that had established its territory on an islet in the middle of a lake. Qin Yi named these two tribes. The northern one was called Man. The southern one was called Huang. The civilizations of these two tribes were also different. One conquered all tribes through barbaric invasions and cruel methods. The other by killing some and sparing others, conquering one land and governing it, established the southern tribe. Qin Yi would certainly choose the southern tribe. This was because Huang seemed like a more qualified leader. He appeared to be the most representative wise man of the early Homo sapiens. He understood in his heart that barbaric methods would only make those tribes temporarily submissive. Once a stronger force emerged, conflict would inevitably erupt once more. Man of the northern tribe, relying on his own brute force, had defeated all the warriors within his tribe. He conquered everything with sheer might. But once he grew old and frail, his physical strength would naturally be no match for the younger generation. At that time, a bloody struggle for the chieftain's position would inevitably ensue. In contrast, under the gentle rule of Huang of the southern tribe, his people had already begun to live relatively prosperous lives. Huang encouraged everyone to engage in production. He also laid brick and stone paths connecting to various tribes, encouraging them to integrate with one another. Although the concept of marriage didn't exist yet, and women could have multiple men at this time, they were driven purely by the instinct to reproduce. Furthermore, Huang would arrange for strong men to hunt outside, killing or driving away all the fierce beasts in the surrounding areas. A huge gap had formed between the northern and southern tribes. System. Can you simulate what the final outcome would be if I were to choose either man or Huang as my champion? Qin Yi did not choose directly. Instead, he consulted the system. Having the system perform a simulation allowed him to quickly see the ultimate result of his potential choices. He could then select the optimal outcome, allowing him to avoid many detours. It was like everyone wanting a chance to start over and make a different choice. Qin Yi's current situation was essentially another form of starting over. Soon the system provided its answer. Simulation result 1. Support the southern tribe. Guide Huang to establish the first nation named Xia. Huang becomes the sovereign. One named Songjia creates writing. One named the high priest creates rites and etiquette. Eventually the northern and southern lands are unified, completing the unification. Technology develops rapidly. Probability of achieving a technological civilization 96. Simulation result 2. Support the northern tribe. Guide man to establish the first nation named Xia. Man becomes the sovereign. A great shaman attempts to rebel. Man is severely injured while suppressing the rebellion. One named Chio, a great general, leads the barbarian tribes south during the winter. The north and south engage in conflict for 10 years. Huang is forced into servitude, enduring humiliation for 3 years. Man lies severely wounded while Qiyu bides his time to seize power. Huang persuades other tribes, and after Qiyu murders Man in a coup, they rise up together. After a year of warfare and under the host's guidance, they defeat Qiyu and establish the Shang dynasty. Technology begins to develop. Probability of achieving a technological civilization 87. Qin Yi finished reviewing the results of these 2 simulations. He discovered that regardless of the path, Huang was the most suitable leader and founding monarch. Even if he supported Man, Huang would ultimately replace him. It seemed like Qin Yi's choice, but perhaps it was also a form of divine will. Times create heroes. Huang was like a child of destiny. He was destined to sit upon that iron throne. System. If I choose Huang, what should I do? Qin Yi pondered for a moment, then decided to support this child of destiny. He wanted to rapidly build a technological civilization. System. Guide in secret, offer sound advice and instill culture. Or system. Act as a steward, providing guidance on his behalf. Qin Yi directly chose the system stewardship option. With such a good service available, why not use it? Suddenly Qin Yi felt as if another consciousness had been born within him. He appeared upon the planet. A small island in the middle of a lake where the southern tribe resided was the home of Huang and his family. He used wooden stakes. He built a wooden bridge connecting to the islet. To the east of the islet was the high council meeting place of the southern tribe. There stood a very large thatched hut. Around it were various other huts, large and small, housing many people originally from Huang's tribe. Huang was deep in thought. He was a wise man. Therefore, he spent much of his time contemplating. The tribe was currently very stable overall. However, on the other side of the great river, there was a very powerful tribe whose leader was called Man. Huang had heard that this man was extremely powerful. He had conquered all the tribes of the northern lands through force. Huang, however, did not favor the use of force. He believed that all people were the same and should be able to become like family to one another. They should unite against the wild beasts, not kill their own kind. Now that Man had conquered all the northern tribes, his next step would surely be against the southern tribe that Huang led. How could he defend against this barbaric tribe? Huang felt a gust of wind. He looked around and noticed that the mist was beginning to drift towards the small island in the center of the lake. Finally, it condensed into the form of a person. This being was clad in a robe of brilliant golden yellow. He appeared utterly noble and majestic. Who art thou? Huang asked, astonished inwardly, yet maintaining a composed demeanor outwardly. Qin Yi floated in the air and spoke. I am the spirit of the great Tao. Huang did not know what the spirit of the great Tao meant, but he could sense that this golden-robed figure hovering in the air was extraordinary. May I ask what business do you have? Huang inquired. Qin Yi, with his hands clasped behind his back, replied, I can grant you the power to defeat Man. Huang's eyes widened, and he took a deep breath before asking, May I ask what must I offer in return? He possessed great wisdom. After Qin Yi appeared, Huang neither panicked nor showed fear, nor did he blindly worship Qin Yi as an omnipotent being. In his understanding, if the other party wanted to give him a benefit, they would certainly want something in return. This was also the prototype of early trade. Qin Yi nodded, acknowledging him as truly the first wise man of humanity. I am the spirit of the great Tao. The stronger and more numerous humanity becomes, the stronger I become. I do not need you to give me anything. I only require you to lead humanity to become the overlords of this continent. Huang immediately bowed, expressing his reverence and respect. Huang is willing to accept. Qin Yi then simply reached out and pointed. A stream of willpower was directly transmitted into Huang's mind: how to establish an army, how to develop agriculture, how to tame wild beasts, how to raise livestock, how to make fire by drilling wood, how to weave coarse cloth, how to... A vast amount of knowledge flooded into Huang's mind. Thank you, spirit of the great Tao. Huang vows to lead humanity to become the strongest. Qin Yi transformed into mist and slowly dissipated. Huang walked out from the islet. He convened a meeting of the tribal alliance and declared that man would become their greatest enemy. To protect all the people of the southern tribe, they must establish an army. Huang personally selected all the strongest men within the tribe. Those with higher intelligence were appointed as squad leaders. Through training, those with greater abilities were promoted. Around this time, a man named Songjie, guided by some unknown force, created writing. Huang appointed him as prime minister, and the two became close confidants. There was also a high priest who established rites and ceremonies. Initially, these were for worshipping heaven and earth. Huang decreed that the spirit of the great Tao be revered as heaven. Then a woman learned to weave coarse cloth. The people of Huang's tribe now had clothing made of coarse cloth. Later they began to pen up small herbivorous animals. The frequency of hunting expeditions decreased. The strong men began training and established some garrison camps along the banks of the great river. After a year of development, the southern tribe possessed the strength to defeat man's tribe. As winter arrived, the river's surface froze over. The water sources in the north diminished, and the animals had long since crossed the great river at places where the current was slow. They came south to spend the winter. Man's tribe, in need of food, had no choice but to cross the great river. Man let out a mighty roar, preparing to lead his tribe's warriors to conquer Huang's tribe. Warriors, the northern barbarians seek to invade our tribe, plunder our food, and oppress our kin. Would you stand idly by and let this happen? Huang stood upon the high platform. On the other side of the great river, man was leading his tribal warriors, charging towards the river that had frozen over with a thick layer of ice. No, below the platform, the warriors of Huang's tribe roared in unison. The developments of this past year had granted them robust and powerful physiques. They now possessed bows and arrows, woven vine armor, wicker shields, and over 100 tamed mounts. On the other side of this camp, beasts were also caged. They had also learned to coordinate and fight in small units. Facing the true invasion of the man tribe, they were utterly unafraid. Huang looked upon his warriors, whose morale was soaring high. Standing atop the watchtower, he observed the man tribe's charge. They were about to cross the river. First squad, Huang commanded. The vine-armored soldiers adorned with feathers in their hair stepped forward. At your command, Huang released the beasts. The vine-armored soldiers swiftly marched to the edge of the camp. They pulled open the cages made of wooden stakes. Just as they neared the great river, they flung the cages open. The beasts were unleashed. They had been starved for days. Every single time, Huang would only feed them meager rations, keeping them hungry for when the man tribe invaded. This way, they would unleash their wild nature. Man saw the beasts. He gave no order to defend. He simply charged at them alone. Behind him, his warriors followed his lead. They pounced upon the beasts. Man seized a beast's neck with one hand. One punch. The beast let out a pained cry. 3 punches. The beast lost all strength to resist. Man threw the beast to the ground, then beat his chest and let out a thunderous roar, displaying his immense power. However, the other warriors of his tribe did not possess man's overwhelming strength and prowess. Many of them perished in that initial beast charge. Man dodged the beasts. Leading his warriors, he charged once more towards Huang's camp. Swish! The bowstrings crafted from boiled tendons and arrows tipped with sharp hard stones flew in thick clusters. A sky filled with arrows. The people of the man tribe encountered such weapons for the first time. Instantly, half of them were dead or wounded. As valiant as man was, he was still flesh and blood. He dodged several arrows, but still 2 found their mark. At this moment, a flicker of retreat crossed his mind, but the fierce competitive spirit within him drove him forward once more. The warriors behind him, seeing man rise and charge again, they roared in defiance and followed suit. Swish! A second volley of arrows descended. This time, man used the bodies of his fallen warriors as shields. He survived. Behind him, his warriors imitated his tactic. Finally, man was about to reach the camp's palisade. Huang immediately ordered, "Go engage." A stalwart man clad in robes and vine armor, wielding a long spear, stepped forth. At your command, he vaulted down from the camp's wall. He waved his hand. Behind him, the warriors of Huang's tribe raised their long spears or held short spears with wicker shields. Charge! The camp gates swung open. Gu led Huang's warriors in a charge. Man, having suffered repeated setbacks, now saw the warriors of Huang's tribe. He let out a high-pitched roar, beating his chest, then charged forward. The wicker shields absorbed man's impact. From behind the shields, short spears thrust out. This was a formation they had drilled extensively. Man was wounded again. The pain across his body ignited his savagery, ignoring the short spears embedded in him. He kicked at a wicker shield, then grabbed a warrior with both hands and hurled him away. His fists could even shatter the wicker shields. It was clear just how powerful this man was. Yet, in the face of coordinated warfare, his individual strength was still insufficient. Utilizing the battle formation they had practiced for so long, slowly wore down man's stamina. Man's body was already covered in numerous bleeding wounds. He had been surrounded by Gu and his men. In the rear, the warriors man had led, with their leader now cut off. Their morale had already halved. The earlier beast charge and the sudden arrow volleys, their spirits were utterly crushed. When they met the disciplined army Huang had trained, they broke and scattered instantly. The warriors of Huang's tribe pressed their advantage. They began to hunt them down. Man's wounds multiplied. His initial ferocity was gone. Gu directed his warriors to approach cautiously, probing and testing, seizing opportunities to inflict more wounds on man. Man panicked. He felt himself trapped in a life-or-death predicament. He spun around, searching for a weakness in the formation. Finally, he saw it. A few warriors, their eyes held fear. Ah! Man roared at them, then charged. Gu saw the danger. He immediately spurred his tamed reindeer mount. Racing to the gap, he lunged at man. Man threw a punch. Gu blocked it with his wicker shield. Boom! Man took a step back. Gu staggered back 3 steps. His entire arm felt numb. But that brief moment of obstruction gave the other warriors precious time to react. They closed in again. Man grew even more frantic. He roared again, but the warriors were no longer afraid. On this battlefield, only man, the sole enemy, remained. A warrior rushed in for a sneak attack. Man reacted. He spun around swiftly, throwing a punch. But behind him, another warrior seized the opportunity to lunge. A short spear thrust into man's waist. Up. This time, man let out a scream of agony. Seeing this, the other warriors swarmed in. Man perished under their short spears. The voice of the spirit of the Tao echoed in Huang's ears. Go up. Cut off man's head. Go up. Huang immediately led his men out of the camp. Huang. The warriors saw Huang. They saluted respectfully. Huang looked at man standing there, his body pierced with short spears. He was not quite dead yet. Gouts of blood spilling from his mouth. Huang drew a curved blade forged from gold. This was a golden scimitar crafted under the guidance of the spirit of the Tao. It was a symbol of Huang's status among the southern tribes. Thud. Although the scimitar was sharpened to a fine edge, gold was simply not as hard as bronze or iron. Huang only managed to cut halfway through. I am Emperor Huang. Huang raised the blood-stained golden scimitar and declared loudly, Emperor Huang, Emperor Huang, Emperor Huang. Everyone knelt and hailed him. Huang had accomplished much this year. He had trained he had taught the women weaving. He had taught everyone how to domesticate beasts. He ensured everyone had enough to eat. He had also, one achievement after another, had forged Huang's unprecedented and towering reputation. The entire tribe, everyone respected and revered this wise leader. Huang reorganized his forces. He led his warriors and began to march north. On the wooden frame of the war chariot hung the head of man. Wherever they went, the people of the Man tribe submitted. Huang brought back some women and supplies from the Man tribe. He returned to his own tribe. At this moment, Huang's prestige reached its zenith. Following the instructions of the spirit of the Tao, he established a nation named Xia. North and South had interacted for some time across the frozen river. People from the northern tribes, seeing the prosperity and strength of the South, began to migrate southward. Huang, however, refused them. He ordered his people to go to the upstream area and construct a wooden bridge using wooden stakes, creating a bridge for interaction between north and south. He then commanded his craftsmen to build wooden boats. In this way, the great river between north and south was no longer a barrier between them. Specialties of the north could be traded for those of the south, and Huang had already arranged for people to bring education and civilization to the northern lands. Huang, guided by the spirit of the Tao, also established the official administrative system for the Xia nation, implementing a hierarchical management structure. Schools were established in various regions to teach children literacy. It was at this time papermaking was invented. In the 3rd year of the Xia nation's founding, they possessed paper. With paper, naturally they needed ink and brushes. Initially they just used charcoal. After an inkstone deposit was discovered in a southern region, the writing brush also appeared. People began to record the process of how Emperor Huang led them to strength. Huang became the earliest and greatest sage on this planet. At this time, the origins of technological civilization began to develop. Many products of technological civilization began to emerge during this era. Emperor Huang began receiving guidance from the spirit of the great Tao at the age of 20. At 23, he expanded the southern tribes. By 25, he established the Xia nation. He ruled the Xia nation for 25 years. At the age of 50, due to illness, harsh climate, and poor diet, he fell gravely ill and was confined to his bed. At this moment, the third time accelerator was also exhausted. Qin Yi looked at Huang, who was now ravaged by disease and dim of sight. In his heart, there was a sense of reluctance. Huang was the wisest human on this planet, having single-handedly built the now prosperous Xia nation, which rivaled the era of the Great Qin. For 25 years, Huang had been diligent and devoted, always keeping the world in his heart. He had enacted the Great Xia Code, insisting on ruling the nation by law. He also insisted on equality for all. Though it seems similar to the Great Qin era, the ideas instilled by Qin Yi from the very beginning were not those of feudal monarchy. After all, Qin Yi aimed to build a civilization of science and technology, not a feudal one. Huang likewise did not pursue the path of centralized autocracy to strengthen his imperial rule. He was open to advice and appointed officials based on merit. 5 years ago, he established the imperial examination system, saving the humans of this planet many detours on their path of development. Now he was old. Do you have any unfulfilled wishes? Qin Yi could not save him. Survival of the fittest. Natural selection. This was the rule set for this planet from the very beginning. Qin Yi could not break this rule. Qin Yi could already hear some sobbing, or perhaps the low cries of delight. Awakening a planet had a far greater impact on one's life than the Huang looked at Qin Yi, who stood upon the clouds floating in the air. After death, he began, what happens? He had finally asked this question. When he first met Qin Yi, Huang believed that a greater sage must exist in this world. At that time, the concept of gods did not yet exist. But there were sages like Huang himself. So Huang regarded Qin Yi as the pinnacle of wisdom. And after death, perhaps he would become even greater. This was why Huang did not fear death. Qin Yi had also noticed that Huang sometimes seemed hesitant to speak, likely harboring questions about his existence. This was the wisdom befitting a sage. Do you know the stars in the sky? Qin Yi asked. After death, you will become one of those stars. Huang's eyes lit up upon hearing this. So that was it. It seemed his thoughts were correct. Qin Yi continued, what else do you wish to know? Huang shook his head. Qin Yi then dissolved into mist. Huang knew his end was near. He was about to become a star in the sky. The next day, Crown Prince Shang of the Xia nation came to visit. Huang spoke, Shang, I am about to die. Summon all the ministers. I have words for all of you. Shang was startled, his expression turning sorrowful. Impossible. Grandfather is a sage. Our prosperity today is all thanks to your brilliance. Grandfather cannot die. You will live forever. Huang reached out and patted Shang's shoulder. He had had several children back then. Following the guidance of the spirit of the great Tao, he had chosen Shang. For Shang was the brightest among all his children, the only one capable of inheriting this great legacy. All right, Huang said. Wait a moment. I will tell you a secret. Your grandfather is not truly the ultimate. It is time you knew this secret. Shang looked up, seeing the reassuring gaze in Huang's eyes. He knew Huang would never deceive him. As for what the secret was, he cared not. Shang only wished for his grandfather to live. Huang was the spiritual pillar of the entire Xia nation. With him alive, the Xia nation would not fall into chaos. But Huang would not lie to him. His grandfather was a sage. In the end, Shang summoned all the officials of the Xia nation. The grand bedchamber was now filled with many people. With Shang's help, Huang dressed in fine robes and took his seat upon the high throne. Honored ministers, he began. I vaguely recall the days when this imperial palace was far less grand than it is today. Back then, Huang paused, reminiscing about the past. The Xia nation's prosperity today is the result of our collective struggle and your dedicated governance. Now I am old. I wish to go and see my old friends from those days. I wish to drink and sing with Gu once more. I wish to speak of mountains and rivers with Song Jia over wine. Huang gasped for breath. The ministers' faces were filled with sorrow and concern. I entrust this nation of Xia to you all. I hope you will diligently assist Shang in governing the Xia nation together. Though Shang is young, he has been under my tutelage all these years. He is a worthy sage. I hope you will not grieve over my death, for life and death are but the way of heaven. Shang could bear it no longer. With tears streaming down his face, he stepped forward, knelt on one knee, and took Huang's hand. Grandfather. Huang patted Shang's hand and said with a smile, my child, fear not. When I was your age, I was already leading the tribe's people to form alliances with other tribes. You too will grow, and you too will face death. I will be waiting for you. I will listen as you recount the rise and strength of the Xia nation. Huang consoled Shang for a moment, then spoke solemnly to the ministers. Today I, Huang, have ruled the Xia nation for 25 years. I decree that Shang shall be the emperor of the Xia nation. The ministers, suppressing their grief, paid their respects to Shang. Huang gestured for Shang to rise. Shang, Huang said. Go now. Shang stood up and addressed the ministers. Rise. Huang nodded in satisfaction. He instructed Shang to dismiss the ministers. Venerable one. Shang called out tentatively to the hall. Would you be willing to show yourself, eh? Shang stared wide-eyed, filled with confusion and curiosity. Mist appeared around the bedchamber. A figure clad in golden robes emerged, standing upon the clouds float. Shang Huang said, "Go and pay your respects to the Venerable One." Shang was utterly dumbfounded. Only after Huang's reminder and a gentle push did he snap back to reality. Shang pays respects to the Venerable One. Qin Yi nodded and said, "Rise." Huang introduced him. "This is the spirit of the great Tao. I call him the Venerable One. Back then it was through his guidance that I defeated man. Later the weaving, animal husbandry, military training, the founding of the Xia nation, and the governance of the realm. All were guided by him. Without him your grandfather might have long perished when man marched south." Shang could hardly believe it. All of this was not his grandfather's own doing. It was guided by this Venerable One before him. It was as if he had been leaning on a great mountain only to discover another, even greater mountain behind it. Qin Yi spoke. "Shang, you are the successor Huang has cultivated, and you will be the second emperor of the Xia nation. Are you ready?" Shang paused for a moment, then replied, "I am ready." Qin Yi nodded. Huang was also satisfied. Seeing this, Qin Yi let out a soft sigh. Shang turned around and discovered that Huang had already passed away. Grandfather. As the first emperor of the Xia nation, posterity's evaluation of Huang was exceedingly high. This was the origin of human technological civilization, a subject worthy of eternal study. Later Huang was even hailed by netizens as Huang the Heavenly Emperor. The era of Huang had ended. The era of Shang had begun. Qin Yi once again purchased a time accelerator. The simulation continued. This was the last time accelerator. Once it was used up, Qin Yi would have no more money to continue spending on in-game purchases. The few star coins he had left were the final funds of this family. Unless Qin Yi was willing to sell this small house. Although it was a bit old and cramped with just one bedroom, one living room, one kitchen, and one bathroom, it was still the result of 2 generations of the Qin family's hard work. With swift boats, flying beasts, or even magic buses available, it wasn't considered remote by any standard. However, birds of a feather flocked together. Even in this vehicle city, there were affluent districts and impoverished ones. Where Qin Yi lived was the middle zone. From the bedroom window, one could see the towering skyscrapers of the rich district. One could see a long courtyard wall beyond which lay the dilapidated and crowded slums. However, all children and youths under the age of 18 would enter the academies. They all had the chance to step onto the path of awakening on the day of awakening. For talent was never determined by one's status. This time Qin Yi slowed down the flow of time in his simulation. Following the memories of his past life, he began to compile textbooks. Fortunately, he hadn't completely returned all his knowledge to his teachers. He still remembered some basic physics, biology, chemistry, mathematics, and medicine. The system actually had this knowledge too, as Qin Yi had asked. But to exchange for it, he needed to spend money. The key issue was he was broke. So he had to do it himself. Venerable One. Shang was reviewing memorials. The territory of the Great Xia dynasty had expanded once more, and its population had risen to 500,000. This was the result of 25 years of hard work. The stability and peace of the overall environment allowed people to procreate with confidence without worrying about not being able to raise their children. The government would step in to help. Moreover, with few forms of entertainment, people couldn't sleep after dark and needed the establishment of etiquette, the birth of legal codes, and the development of ethics and morality all came into being. This also led to a better quality of life for newborn infants. Early humans, due to the harsh environment, did not have very long lifespans. But now people who lived long lives began to appear. That was Huang. In the following years, thanks to the development of medicine and the emergence of healers, the human lifespan increased yet another level. The industry of the Great Xia dynasty also flourished thanks to the knowledge of physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, and medicine that Qin Yi had compiled. Not only that, but Shang also established the Great Xia Academy of Engineering. Pulleys, water wheels, gears, wheelbarrows. Industrial products emerged one after another. This spurred the rapid development of Great Xia's craftsmanship. At this time, even a relatively basic theory could give birth to many unexpected creations. The planet's diameter had also grown from a little over 100 kilometers to its current size of over 1,000 kilometers. Among the current 18-year-old prodigies in terms of the ability to expand the planet's diameter, Qin Yi was second to none. In reality, 10 hours had passed. Within Qin Yi's awakening space, 10 years had gone by. During these 10 years, Shang governed with diligence. The Academy of Engineering developed many industrial techniques and products that benefited the nation and met the people's needs. Shang would designate certain money houses to establish factories, recruit workers, and mass-produce these goods. They were then sold at very low prices. Back in the Huang era, gold and silver coins had been introduced as currency under Qin Yi's guidance. After all, with the nation established and the realm's stabilized, trade could no longer rely on bartering. Bartering was too time-consuming and hindered many people's needs. Gold and silver coins were distributed through various means such as work-for-leave programs, grain purchases, military pay, and state-sponsored trade. Now they had become the standard currency of the Great Xia dynasty. This minting technology was also strictly controlled by the Imperial Mint. As for this technique, it naturally also came from Qin Yi. Qin Yi had looked it up himself and found a common method for forging gold and silver in this world. It was also the most basic ability of alchemy within magic. 5 years later, Great Xia mastered steel smelting technology. 10 years later, Great Xia built its first steel sailing ship. 20 years later, tall buildings stood tall in Great Xia. Horse-drawn carriages, bicycles, and other items appeared. More importantly, a student at the Academy of Engineering named Zi Qi crafted the first fire lance. Gunpowder had been developed 10 years prior. To craft the finest fire lances, the requirements for steel were extremely strict. There had been a barrel explosion. The research on fire lances was then slowed down to focus on steel smelting technology. Only after mastering the blast furnace method could the steel produced be used for fire lances that wouldn't explode. This would become a groundbreaking invention. Great Xia had thus entered the era of firearms. And that wasn't all. Great Xia also possessed the steam engine. With its current development, Great Xia was almost approaching the steam age, yet it was slightly more advanced. Because under Qin Yi's guidance, Great Xia had not taken any detours since its founding. There were no conflicts, no shackles of feudal thought. Knowledge was instilled one piece at a time. Talents from various fields emerged one after another. Venerable One. Just as Qin Yi finished his nutritional supplement, he heard Shang's call from the planet in his awakening space. A sliver of his consciousness entered the awakening space. What is it? Shang knelt on one knee, presenting a piece of metal that looked like steel with both hands. Venerable One, this is a rare metal discovered by the Academy of Engineering. The blast furnace cannot melt it. The steam hammer cannot forge it. After hearing this, Qin Yi floated forward. The metal also levitated. He saw that the metal block had some patterns on it and looked quite smooth. It wasn't ordinary metal. System. What is this metal? Qin Yi couldn't identify its origin either. The system replied vibranium. Qin Yi stared wide-eyed at the panel with the system's response. Vibranium, also known as sound-absorbing steel. It was a special metal from a movie in his past life. It was extremely hard and could absorb kinetic energy, providing formidable defense. How could such a legendary material appear on his own planet? Qin Yi was astonished and overjoyed at the same time. Looking at Shang, who was still kneeling, Qin Yi smiled. Shang, this is the strongest metal called vibranium. A shield forged from vibranium would possess extraordinary defensive capabilities. Shang quickly asked, can it be used to forge firearms? Qin Yi thought about the properties of vibranium. Not for now. There's currently no technology to forge this vibranium. To use it, one must be able to forge it. Shang was somewhat disappointed. Does even the Venerable One have no solution? Qin Yi shook his head and explained, it's not that I can't, but the current smelting technology of Great Xia is not very advanced. As I once said, when technology reaches a certain stage, even flying vessels capable of carrying 100 people can be built. But there's a prerequisite, and that is for technology to reach that stage. Right now, Great Xia's technology is not yet capable of forging vibranium. Qin Yi then asked the system, can you simulate how to use vibranium? After all, this was vibranium. If they could use it, Great Xia's current strength would definitely be elevated to another level. The system replied, mine vibranium, find a suitable shape, and use it as a weapon. In other words, the only way to use vibranium at this stage was to find a piece with a suitable shape and use it as a weapon. Qin Yi had no choice but to instruct Shang to secretly command the Imperial Guard to mine the vibranium. 50 years later, Shang, now 70 years old, had aged. He also asked the same question Huang had asked all those years ago. Qin Yi gave him the same answer. Then Shang passed the throne of the Great Xia Emperor to Zizhou. Zizhou was born with extraordinary strength, though in reality, it just meant he was a bit stronger than the average person. He also possessed exceptional wisdom, scoring high in mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. He truly seemed to perfectly continue Huang's bloodline, becoming a wise man of the human race. At the Academy of Engineering, he developed many things such as the microscope. From then on, humanity learned of another world, the world of microorganisms. He also created the telescope, allowing them to see the surface of the moon in the distant night sky. The stars were later added by Qin Yi through the system. The moon, however, had formed later. It was likely a natural evolution of the planet's origin power as its diameter increased. It was during this time that Zizhou began to ponder what lay beyond Great Xia and whether there were other nations like it. In the 5th year of Zizhou's reign, the time accelerator came to an end. With more and more species and a growing population, the connections between truly a single thread could move the whole web. Thus, the consumption rate of the time accelerator also increased. I need to find a way to take on missions and earn money to continue spending on in-game purchases, Qin Yi muttered softly while eating his nutritional supplement. Qin Yi never imagined that his planet could produce vibranium. This was absolutely a discovery that filled him with delight. However, after the initial excitement, he still needed to calm down. Having vibranium, but being unable to use it was like having mutton within reach, but not being able to eat it. That feeling was unbearable. System, you must have a method to forge vibranium, right? System, vibranium forging technique, 1 planet coins. Qin Yi fell silent for a moment. Well, that was acceptable. Not too expensive. If it were too costly, Qin Yi would have to consider saving up and exchanging for it at a later stage. Given the current strength of the Great Xia nation, possessing vibranium shields, vibranium arrows, and vibranium armor should give us a considerable advantage against some martial artists. Qin Yi stroked his chin, pondering. If they continued to plunder unowned planets, would it have any impact on the development of Great Xia? After all, it required many warriors to go on expeditions. If the casualties were too high, wouldn't it inevitably affect the development of the Great Xia nation? System, he said. If I were to plunder unowned planets now, how great would the impact on the Great Xia nation be? Can you simulate it? Qin Yi once again thought of the system. System, war is the catalyst for the development of civilization. After reading the system's reply, Qin Yi felt. The system definitely supported plundering unowned planets. Since that was the case, what was there to wait for? Qin Yi packed up and visited several small companies in Chaiching. After registration, these small companies also possessed starships that could enter the Dead Star Sea to plunder unowned planets. However, these small companies were not as grand in scale as the Awakened Ones Guild, nor did they possess the advanced starships that led to high-level unowned planets. Based on the information provided by these small companies, Qin Yi screened them carefully. In the end, he chose to cooperate with one small company. They had just been established not long ago, and the people they recruited were all Awakened Ones with relatively small planet diameters and low-level planet energy. I hope we can have a pleasant cooperation. The company owner was relatively young. He had awakened the primal energy within intermediate-level planet energy. He was also a level 3 planet lord himself. This small company was actually an investment from a larger corporation, allowing him to venture out on his own. After all, there were many Awakened Ones every year. Large companies also needed to update and replace their ranks. At this time, small companies came into being, providing many low-level Awakened Ones with opportunities to obtain resources. Qin Yi extended his hand and said, pleasant cooperation. A total of 5 people entered a planet that had just become an unowned planet. This was also a low-level planet energy. The life forms born here possessed telekinesis, capable of manipulating all things. If resources were sufficient, telekinesis, when elevated to its peak, could become extremely powerful. However, this required a great many resources. Source power was inherently a rare resource. For a low-level Awakened One to acquire enough source power to elevate their planet's energy would be an astronomical figure. Everyone, let's begin constructing the chain bridges. With the owner's command, everyone began to construct the chain bridges. After a while, various planetary life forms appeared beside them. From the owner's planet appeared 10 primordial kings, the most powerful life forms on his planet. Following them were ability users and martial artists. When they saw the massive army behind Qin Yi, they were stunned. They all seemed to be ordinary people. The owner frowned, because Qin Yi's planet information seemed to indicate a high-level planet. Planet civilization, ordinary civilization. Planet level 1. Planet diameter 615 kilometers. Planet species 22168. Such planet information was something the owner had never seen before. But everyone had their own secrets. This mission wasn't particularly dangerous anyway. Having one more Awakened One meant an extra layer of security. He thought he had gained the help of a high-level Awakened One. Little did he expect that the other party would bring out they are all warriors. Don't worry, boss, I definitely won't hold you back. If I truly don't contribute any effort, I'll forego my share of the spoils this time. The owner looked at the others. Although he was the boss, he still needed the consent of the others at this moment. After all, a contract had been signed. The compensation at the end also had to be distributed fairly. Otherwise, his reputation would suffer and it would become difficult to recruit cooperative Awakened Ones in the future. Let him tag along. I think it's fine to let him join. Having such a large army, he should be able to handle the low-level telekinetics. Yes, I agree too. Although resources were relatively scarce, these Awakened Ones understood how important even a small resource could be to an Awakened One. Moreover, although those Qin Yi brought were all ordinary people, they exuded an imposing aura as they stood there. They should be able to play a role against the telekinetics. Qin Yi cupped his fists and said, thank you. Only then did the owner say, since you have such a large army, the low-level telekinetics are yours to handle. Qin Yi replied, all right. The owner led his people and launched the plunder. Behind Qin Yi, Zhou, guided by the Tao of the Great Way, began leading the army in a massacre of the low-level telekinetics on the planet. As for the high-level telekinetics, those were the responsibility of the owner and his team. Boss, look, just as they were locked in a stalemate with the high-level telekinetics, they noticed that a massive army below them was engaged in a one-sided slaughter. The telekinetics powers were actually ineffective against this army. It was only then that they realized this army was anything but ordinary. The owner was also somewhat surprised. However, in this world, many Awakened Ones possessed various kinds of planet energy, giving rise to many powerful abilities. Qin Yi's situation wasn't particularly astonishing to the owner. Alright everyone, let's put in more effort. Once we kill these high-level telekinetics, our mission will be complete. Everyone replied, alright. As the low-level telekinetics fell, the energy of this unowned planet also began to slowly dissipate. Qin Yi along with Zizhou and the soldiers of Great Xia witnessed a great battle as the owner and the other three fought against the high-level telekinetics. In the end, those telekinetics were defeated. The highest life form of the unowned planet was killed. Qin Yi then had Zizhou lead the army back. This unowned planet was automatically converted into source power. The owner stored it in obsidian and upon returning to the company immediately listed it for sale online. This time Qin Yi earned 600 planet coins, almost as much as the owner. Afterwards, Qin Yi successively visited several other companies and accepted missions, until the president of the Chaiching Awaken Ones Guild, Tong Bailey, came to find him. I've come this time to invite you to participate in an Awaken Ones competition to be held a month from now. You should have heard of the Chaiching Youth Tournament. I hope you can participate. The Chaiching Youth Tournament begins 1 month after Awakening Day every year. It is co-founded by 10 cities and organized by the authorities. Participants must be Awakened Ones who have awakened their planets within the past 3 years. It's considered an entertainment competition. It also serves to select the strongest rookie Awakened One from each city. The winners will receive official recognition, substantial resource support, and special training from the guild. Qin Yi originally intended to continue keeping a low profile. Tong Bailey's eyes held a hint of inscrutability as he said, "You've taken on quite a few missions in the past 10-odd days. I know all about it. You want to hide your abilities. In this era, that's not really possible. The 10 big bosses of Chaiching have already set their sights on you. They won't let go of any Awakened One with potential." Qin Yi was well aware of the connections and influence wielded by the Awakened Union and the top 10 corporations. Yet he couldn't simply stop taking on missions to earn money for his in-game purchases just because he feared being discovered. After all, spending money was the only way to grow stronger. He merely wished to secure his ultimate freedom. Tong Bailey observed the silent Qin Yi. A hint of approval gleamed in his eyes. To nurture a planet from a mere 1 kilometer in size to over 600 kilometers, and to command an army that rivals a psionics forces. Given half a year, this might seem commonplace. But you've accomplished this in less than half a month. You've forged an ordinary civilized planet into one that rivals a low-tier energy planet. It seems miracles perpetually reside within you. Qin Yi remained remarkably composed. He responded, "Thank you for the praise, President. My talent is limited. I rely solely on diligence." President Tong inquired, puzzled. "Then why not collaborate with a corporation? With their backing, perhaps your achievements would be even greater." Qin Yi's gaze hardened with resolve as he looked at Tong Bailey, slowly articulating, "For freedom. I have no desire to become someone's wage slave." Tong Bailey was taken aback. In that moment, he perceived a unique aura emanating from Qin Yi. Resort to any means necessary to enhance their power and seize the primordial force. If anyone else possessed Qin Yi's abilities, they might have already sought the patronage of a major corporation to rapidly acquire abundant resources. They would build a colossal planet, command an army of millions, and create a legend unprecedented in the history of planet masters. Yet Qin Yi chose a different path. For freedom. It sounded somewhat absurd at first. Yet upon deeper reflection, it commanded respect. Because Tong Bailey himself had relied on major corporations in his youth to grow stronger. All the resources plundered, all the rewards and benefits won from competitions, and the primordial force and honors obtained through relentless effort and cunning schemes. A significant portion was invariably siphoned off by the corporations. He was also subject to their directives, having to cater to the whims of the directors' relatives and endure their commands. Eventually, he managed to grow powerful enough, used certain means to befriend the city lord, and gained official recognition from the Chai City authorities. He became the director of the Chai City Awakened Union and step by step ascended to the position of president. Over the years, however, he realized he had merely transitioned from plundering resources for corporations to doing so for the city lord. The essence of his situation hadn't truly changed. Freedom. How laughable. Yet Tong Bailey did not mock Qin Yi for this small, somewhat naive wish. He knew that the road ahead would teach Qin Yi the harsh realities of this world. Well spoken indeed for freedom. However, if you desire freedom, you must first become immensely powerful. Only when you are strong enough that no one can restrain you might you achieve true freedom. In this life, one often acts against one's will. So for this upcoming competition, do you still refuse to participate? Qin Yi pondered for a few seconds before replying to Tong Bailey, "I'll go. But before that, I wish to sign a contract with you, President Tong." Tong Bailey understood Qin Yi's intention. Once the contract was signed, Qin Yi would officially be a member of the Union, and Tong Bailey would be obligated to ensure his safety. Tong Bailey replied, "Agreed. I am also curious to see just how many more miracles you hold." He produced a jade slip, and moments later, a contract materialized in his hand. This is a standard contract drafted by the Union. I've had several clauses removed to grant you the maximum freedom. This is the extent of what I can do. Qin Yi took the contract and reviewed it. Indeed, compared to the templates he had found online, the contract offered by Tong Bailey was the most liberating one he could have hoped for. Qin Yi then entered the awakening space and constructed a mental link. A wisp of planetary energy was summoned and infused into the contract. At the bottom right corner beside the awakener's signature, a small blue planet materialized. It resembled a miniature blue planet existing in another dimension. This was the awakener's pact. It was binding for life. Unless the other party initiated a termination, Qin Yi would be bound by the contract's stipulations. For instance, he was required to comply with certain union activity arrangements. Attendance was mandatory for major events while minor ones could be skipped, but they might use his name for promotional purposes. Hey Race, 1 million planet coins. I've noticed you've been taking on many missions lately and must be short on funds. Now that you've signed this contract, you're one of us. I won't treat you unfairly. Also, you can purchase Primordial Force from the Union at a 50 discount. Tong Bailey handed Qin Yi a card. He continued, I will inform you of the competition date. In the meantime, will you be staying at the Union or at home? Qin Yi accepted the card. At home. Tong Bailey stood up. Very well. Focus on nurturing your planet then. Feel free to visit the Union whenever you need to take on missions. After seeing Tong Bailey off, Qin Yi sat down and fell into deep thought. Honestly, signing this contract was a possibility he had already contemplated over these past few days. Comparatively speaking, the Awakened Union was a more acceptable option for him than the top 10 corporations of Chase City. Qin Yi had no desire to join them. Every Awakener could learn from the news or other channels about the true nature of these corporations. They existed solely to plunder resources from unowned planets in the Dead Star Sea. Their ultimate goal was to serve the interests of the directors who founded them. These directors were high-level planet masters who required exponentially more primordial force to advance, facing increasingly higher thresholds with each level. Thus, they needed to cultivate numerous planet masters to amass wealth and primordial force for them. In his past life, Qin Yi was a victim of the 996 work culture. Naturally, he had no intention of becoming a beast of burden again. After his interactions with Tong Bailey, Qin Yi concluded that compared to private corporations, the officially managed union was somewhat more favorable for awakeners. This was why he decided to cooperate with Tong Bailey after the latter presented his proposal. System exchange for vibranium forging technology. With the 1 million planet coins from Tong Bailey, Qin Yi could afford to be lavish for once. System exchange successful. Vibranium forging technology will be inherited by Gongshu Ban. A wisp of consciousness entered the awakening space. Gongshu Ban, a master craftsman of the Grand Xia Ministry of Works, was a recipient of the prestigious Grand Xia Royal Master Artisan honor. He also served as an honorary vice dean of the Tiangong Academy. Furthermore, he was a marquis of Grand Xia and the most influential craftsman of the Shang and Zizhou eras. And now on this day, he suddenly received the vibranium forging technology. Knowledge regarding the forging of vibranium flashed brilliantly within his mind. Qin Yi also guided Zizhou to provide Gongshu Ban with the utmost support. The goal was to forge vibranium into true vibranium shields, vibranium arrows, and vibranium armor. Ideally, they would even create full suits of iron armor. To this end, Qin Yi once again utilized the time accelerator. After the previous campaign, using the armies of Xia, everyone throughout the nation became aware of the existence of another continent. Only the sovereign of Xia possessed the ability to open a passage to this other continent. Sovereign Zizhou led his forces through a special gateway and entered the new land. There they encountered a diverse array of formidable beings. There were psychics who could soar through the air and manipulate the elements, and martial artists honed to physical perfection who cultivated their inner chi. There were also aberrations, creatures with many tentacles radiating a spectral energy that induced hallucinations. In short, every campaign the army undertook resulted in casualties. Yet they also gained significant resources such as martial arts manuals. Some soldiers became as agile as swallows, while others grew even stronger and more robust. The people of Xia also began to practice martial arts. They also discovered unique and delicious foods, as well as exotic beasts and rare treasures. In this new environment, people began to look beyond their immediate self-interests. They started to support the training of the army, contribute to its funding, and back the sovereign's campaigns. Of course, a small minority opposed the expeditions, as each one resulted in the deaths of soldiers. Furthermore, there was a prevailing theory that those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. They feared that Xia might one day be defeated by an even more powerful enemy. However, Zizhou distributed the many treasures obtained from other planets, keeping only a small portion for this earned him widespread support. His goal was not to revel in these exotic riches, but to savor the thrill of conquest itself. He sought the exhilaration of vanquishing diverse enemies. In just half a year, Gongshu Ban utilized the planet's resources to forge the first suit of vibranium armor. The silver-white armor and white robe worn by Zizhou instantly gave him an imposing and powerful aura. He walked directly through a fire in his armor, emerging completely unscathed. "Long live Xia!" Zizhou shouted, raising his black sniper rifle. This weapon was also personally crafted by Gongshu Ban, using newly developed gunpowder and featuring exquisite mechanical craftsmanship. With a range of 300 meters, it could even surprise and defeat a flying opponent. Unless, of course, that opponent was a mid-level ability user. Against such a foe, bullets would pose no threat whatsoever. On the back of the armor was mounted a dragon gull silk. This was for when bullets could not harm the enemy and combat would descend into a white-knuckle melee. The soldiers of Xia were trained not only in marksmanship, but also in close-quarters combat. And in close combat, no one was more formidable than the third sovereign of Xia, Zizhou. He was like a god of war, even mightier than the legendary man of old. For Zizhou possessed not only immense heaven-given strength, but also the mind of a strategist. He understood that Xia could not become the strongest through its own development alone. Only by heeding the guidance of the Tao spirit and conquering various planets to acquire resources could Xia secure a more distant future. This period of accelerated time allowed Qin Yi to amass an elite force of nearly 10,000 soldiers, all clad in vibranium armor. They were armed with automatic rifles, carried vibranium machetes on their backs, and were supported by squads equipped with round vibranium shields. There were also archers with vibranium arrows effective up to 100 meters, along with bolt-throwing siege crossbows, handheld crossbows, light cavalry, and heavy cavalry. The cavalry were mounted on warhorses wielding lances and carrying vibranium-forged swords on their saddles. This 10,000-strong army comprised 6 distinct branches of force. Qin Yi had helped Zizhou select from the finest soldiers in the realm. To acquire more technological knowledge, Qin Yi needed to continue taking on missions from the guild. One purpose was to give this newly formed army a chance to train and integrate. The other purpose was to accumulate star coins. Spending money was the only way to grow stronger. The generator principle technology required 2 million star coins. According to the system, the generator principle wasn't just about simple power generation, it encompassed knowledge of electrical engineering, electromagnetism, and more. And Xia was still in the steam age. An even more powerful technology, the arc reactor, was available for 10 million star coins. Alternatively, the system could exchange the origin power of a mid-level planet for certain technologies. However, the origin power of a mid-level planet was typically valued at around 8 million star coins. The origin power of low-level planets, however, ranged from 100,000 to 1 million star coins, because there were countless low-level planets in the Dead Star Sea. After all, it was a world where the strong preyed on the weak, much like the Youth Awakener tournament. Every year, no fewer than several hundred Awakeners died in that competition. "Mr. Qin, you finally arrived. Please, this way." As Qin Yi arrived at the Awakener Guild and was about to head upstairs, he was met by the hurriedly approaching Li Xiaoya. He responded with a polite smile. "Thank you." Li Xiaoya quickly replied, "Mr. Qin, this is the least I can do." It had been over 10 days since she was assigned by Tong Bailey to be Qin Yi's personal attendant. But during that time, Qin Yi never showed up. She later learned he had been taking on missions from smaller external companies. Her heart sank. Her salary was directly tied to serving Qin Yi. If he stopped coming, she would be relegated to her previous, less desirable position. She would have to serve all sorts of Awakeners again. While they weren't mistreated within the guild, it was exhausting work. The pay was low, and a single mistake could lead to more than just dismissal. It could threaten her very survival. Li Xiaoya only breathed a sigh of relief when she learned that Qin Yi had officially signed a contract with the guild. She then led him to a private room on the second floor. The guild building appeared modest from the outside, though its interior was lavishly decorated. In reality, it contained many hidden spaces. Some were cave-dwelling spaces created by cultivators, while others were exotic realms crafted by archmages using their magic. This was how the guild could accommodate all the Awakeners of Chase City. The private room was well-stocked with not only common amenities like fruit, pastries, and drinks, but also offered the ability to exchange origin power and other resources from the Dead Star Sea at any time. The treatment for high-level Awakeners was beyond the imagination of ordinary ones. Qin Yi selected an unclaimed planet abundant in primordial qi. This primordial qi was similar to the concepts he had seen in martial arts dramas in his past life. Life on such planets typically evolved into humanoids. With sufficient origin power, it was possible to nurture formidable innate experts in a very short time. These experts could fly and wield martial arts techniques that attacked opponents using qi. A level 1 primordial qi planet usually only produced low-level warriors only slightly stronger than ordinary humans. At level 2, innate experts would begin to appear. If it were elevated to level 5, it would be comparable to the powerful beings found on high-energy planets. They could achieve immortality, and their strength would be enough to move mountains and fill seas. The highest level of a planet's grade remained a mystery. Perhaps only the first awakener from 100 years ago knew the answer. 10,000 troops stood in perfect formation. The great Xia Emperor himself presided from the rear. Shield-bearers formed the vanguard with infantry ranks behind them. Crossbowmen and mounted ballistae flanked the left while light cavalry took the right. Heavy cavalry anchored the rear. Zizhou led this formation slowly across the unfamiliar planet. The spirit of the great Tao had spoken. This was a masterless land, and he was to lead the army to conquer it. Victory over the planet's mightiest warrior was the key. Doing so would grant them access to martial techniques. Though these arts were arcane and difficult to master, they still held some value for the people of Great Xia. Some had already trained to become as swift as swallows through these techniques. He himself could feel a vital force surging within his body. Conquest. He relished this feeling. Report. Of the 10 scouts dispatched, only 3 returned. Commander enemy forces sighted ahead. Behind the shield wall stood Yang Jian, the Great Xia's Grand Commander and Vanguard General. Form ranks. The army, previously on light alert, instantly became vigilant. They had only advanced 3 li when they encountered enemies clad in strange outlandish attire. These foes leaped through the jungle with astonishing speed. Prepare for battle. Yang Jian bellowed. The shield-bearers immediately raised their shields. Infantry soldiers aimed automatic rifles through the gaps between the shields. Yang Jian's gaze remained fixed on the enemy until most of them entered firing range. Fire! The bullets tore through the air with incredible velocity. These innate warriors encountering such weaponry for the first time fell in droves. Yet one warrior managed to fly swiftly into the midst of the army. A blast of chi energy cratered the ground beneath him. He appeared formidable, but most of his kinetic force was absorbed by the vibranium armor, rendering his threat minimum. In the warrior's moment of stunned hesitation, an arrow pierced clean through his body. Seeing this, the other innate masters halted their advance. They realized their martial skills were proving ineffective against this foe. As they scrambled for new strategies, one charged forward using a fallen comrade as a shield. He sought to shatter the military formation with a single technique, but found his attack had little effect. The shield wall buckled slightly from the impact, but quickly resealed. A stray bullet ended his life. More and more innate warriors appeared, launching suicidal attacks from all. Zizhou swiftly deployed his light and heavy cavalry. Meanwhile, his own sniper rifle claimed several more innate warriors. However, as the battle wore on, the surviving innate warriors proved far more powerful. Bullets had little effect. They could almost dodge them entirely. The vibranium-tipped arrows were even slower. This was the true might of an innate warrior. At a certain level, their speed and power became formidable. They could almost dodge them entirely. The vibranium-tipped arrows were even slower. This was the true might of an innate warrior. At a certain level, their speed and power became... After all, no matter how well vibranium absorbed kinetic energy, it couldn't withstand the onslaught of immortal power. But against innate warriors, it was still a viable weapon. Zizhou used his light cavalry and infantry to encircle the dozen or so innate warriors. These were 2 Ndrank innate warriors. Had the planet's original master not perished, leaving it masterless, its energy slowly dissipating and thinning, they might have ascended to 3 Ndrank. At that level, Qin Yi's 10,000 vibranium-armored troops would have been a negligible threat. But there were no what-ifs. Zizhou led the charge himself. His dragon-spine silver spear forged from vibranium could suppress a portion of the innate chi of these 2 Ndrank warriors. This gave him an absolute advantage in close combat. Zizhou and Yang Jian divided the warriors into 3 smaller groups. Using practiced formations, they systematically whittled down the innate warriors' chi reserves. For following the great battle, these were the last innate warriors on the planet. The planet's energy began to return to its primordial source. Deprived of the planet's continuous support, the surviving warriors were destined to exhaust their innate chi and weaken. And indeed, within just 2 hours, these once mighty innate warriors were panting heavily, their wounds accumulating. Ultimately, they perished under the siege of the vibranium-armored legion. Qin Yi recalled the army. Zizhou ordered the retrieval of the fallen soldiers' remains. The warriors' bodies were also collected. Great Xia now boasted a medical academy, and a physician named Bian Ke was eager to dissect these corpses. He sought to understand the inner workings of both human and alien biology. Qin Yi produced an obsidian shard and absorbed the planet's primordial energy. He then returned to his box via the starship. "Welcome back, Mr. Qin," Li Xiaoya said, bowing gracefully. Her sweet smile, lithe figure, and crisp voice were a pleasant greeting. Returning from battle to be met by a beauty. What a world! Qin Yi was momentarily moved. Given his current status and Tong Bailey's high regard, acquiring such a woman would be a simple matter. But Qin Yi was not a creature governed by base instincts. He had his own freedom to pursue and a goal to become the strongest in this world. As a sci-fi enthusiast in his past life, he yearned to explore the ultimate destination of a technological civilization. The 2-dimensional foil, the droplet, warp drives, This time the primordial energy had been exchanged for nearly 500,000 planet coins. After all, this masterless planet had housed two drank innate warriors nearing the threshold of a low-level 2-star planet. Taking on tasks, especially solo missions from the guild, not only trained the Great Xia army, but also yielded the full reward. In the guild's High Council, the Council of Five, Yi Jifeng reviewed all of Qin Yi's records. He has indeed created a miracle. But the youth tournament is no place for an awakener who's merely pulled off a minor miracle. I acknowledge his planet's diameter is impressive, growing from 1 kilometer to over 600 in under a month. That's faster than even some high-energy planets. And he's done it with minimal resources, relying solely on his own missions and exchanged planet coins. Calling it a miracle isn't hyperbole. But what does he have to defeat his opponents with? Yi Jifeng, a member of the Council of Five at the Chaicheng Awaken Guild, also served as the chief of the Chaicheng Police Department. His preference was for Jiang Fan, who had been groomed by the guild for a year. Jiang Fan was, after all, the master of a planet from a high-energy magical civilization. That year of intensive training was all in preparation for this 10-city joint youth tournament. The prize, 100 million planet coins, the primordial energy of 10 high-energy planets, and a trove of treasures: immortal pills, celestial swords, magic wands, mage robes, dragon bones, spirit beasts. The Awaken Guild, as the official representative of Chaicheng, needed a stellar performance. Otherwise, the city lord's displeasure would spell the end of their careers. Facing Yi Jifeng's skepticism, Tong Bailey remained calm. He knew that choosing Qin Yi would invite such, but he was not worried. For Qin Yi's personal battle record was proof enough of his strength. Tong Bailey produced a prepared jade slip. Upon activation, a projection materialized above the table. It displayed Qin Yi's first battle record. They could not observe the battlefield of the Dead Star Sea, but they had a clear record of how long he took and how much origin power he had gained. Furthermore, data from several battles under small companies was also present here. Only here could one glimpse Qin Yi's true strength. An army of 10,000, with considerable combat prowess. Against psychics, espers, chi warriors, and innate martial artists on low-level unowned planets, he achieved complete victory. In just under a month, he has plundered 10 unowned planets. Today marks his 11th. This particular unowned planet harbors a entire innate martial artist. Yet Qin Yi still managed to conquer it. I believe among the young planet lords he can be considered a favored prodigy. Yi Jifeng finished reviewing the projection and listening to Tong Bailey's analysis. After a moment of silence, he replied, "Indeed, he appears to be a miracle. Brother Bailey, your judgment has always been sound. But since he possesses such potential, why not allocate a portion of resources to aid his growth? Instead, you let him govern his planet alone. A prodigy like this should surely have the service of a management team. Otherwise, wouldn't it make our guild seem petty? Furthermore, does the contract you gave him not violate guild?" Tong Bailey leaned back in his chair. He had already formulated a response to Yi Jifeng's challenges, for he had known from the start what consequences his actions would bring. He looked towards the elder seated at the head. Elder Wang. Qin Yi managed to refuse invitations from the guild and various companies on the day of the school awakening ceremony. This shows he has his own ideas and plans. If I were to force a contract upon him with a heavy hand, I fear it would be counterproductive. Hence this contract was drafted. Since Qin Yi is an ordinary planet lord, signing a standard guild contract would be somewhat unreasonable. A high-tier contract would require us to provide substantial resources. But if Qin Yi turns out not to be a truly promising planet lord, those resources would be wasted. A low-tier contract, however, Qin Yi would not accept. This contract is the middle ground. Elder Wang nodded and addressed the others. I have reviewed Bailey's report. Compared to Jiang Fan, I also favor this Qin Yi. He then said to Yi Jifeng, "Jifeng, our guild has failed to enter the top 20 for 3 years. This time we must be cautious in our selection. Jiang Fan is talented, but in these past 3 years, how many times have we nurtured such talented youths only to fail to reach the top 20? If we don't change our approach, we will truly incur the city lord's wrath." His voice was gentle, carrying a sense of affability. As one of the guild's most senior presidents, his word carried nearly as much weight as the city lord's. Yi Jifeng quickly replied, "Elder Wang, I am also concerned for the guild's reputation. For 3 years, not a single young planet lord has entered the top 20. I fear this year may be the same. The top 10 guilds are already sharpening their blades. Even if we cannot enter the top 20, we must not become a laughingstock. However, since Elder Wang supports, I will defer to your judgment." Elder Wang nodded. Thus, Qin Yi officially became one of the 5 planet lords representing the Chaicheng Awaken Guild in the 10-city joint youth competition. At Tianyu Company, in the meeting room, Chairman Tang Yi listened to the reports from his executives. Each of them managed numerous planet lords using company resources to enhance their strength. For this 10-city joint youth competition, they had also prepared 5 planet lords, grooming them since last year. After internal trials and data analysis, a preliminary list of 10 finalists was determined. Chairman, this is the proposed list of 10 candidates and their information. Please review it. Qin Yi looked at the projection, which contained all the information on the 10 finalists. Every single one was a planet lord with high-tier planetary energy. Their planet levels had all reached Tier 3. The internal environments of their planets were relatively stable, boasting many Tier 3 powerhouses. Moreover, depending on the different planetary energies, they had corresponding cultivation methods and formed battle teams. Crucially, they were all battle-hardened veterans. After reviewing Qin Yi singled out 4 names. These 4 will do. Plus Fian, who has already cultivated a 3-clawed golden dragon and reached planet level 3. The other executives seemed to have anticipated this decision. After all, as the chairman's precious daughter standing out in such a youth competition would earn her considerable prestige. It would also pave the way for a future marriage alliance with the strongest planet lord of Jiangxing. As for the other 9 top-tier companies, they had already finalized their participating planet lords. Not only that, but they were also actively gathering information on all participants, aiming to know their enemies and themselves to ensure victory in every battle. After all, the rewards came from a collective pool of wealth contributed by the 10 cities during the joint competition. Surrounding the central city of Jiangxing were 10 other cities. To strengthen themselves, this was the way, using the resources of 10 cities to enrich one. Each relied on their own strength to ultimately claim the generous rewards. This also served to cultivate an exceptionally powerful planet lord. The central city would also contribute resources to support such leagues. Jiangxing was guarded by several superplanet lords. They could plunder far more resources from the Dead Star Sea and had little interest in the meager resources of the surrounding 10 cities. To contend with the other 8 provinces, Jiangxing needed to elevate the strength of its surrounding cities. This time Qin Yi had exchanged for numerous technologies from the Steam Age. This elevated the power of the entire Great Xia nation to a new level. Factories sprang up everywhere, and steam trains, locomotives, and the like all made their appearance. Furthermore, Qin Yi had also exchanged for high-yield crop seed cultivation technology. This ensured that the people of Great Xia would no longer be burdened by food shortages. The foundation of a nation lies in its food supply. The amount of food determines how many people can be sustained. If food becomes scarce, the population ceiling is reached. As the population grows and food supply becomes insufficient, chaos is inevitable. This would greatly hinder the development of Great Xia. Planet lords typically use origin power to upgrade their planet's level and nurture supernaturals. Qin Yi's planetary energy was ordinary light energy, not even considered low tier. Origin power had little effect on his planet. However, it was also quite useful for purchasing enhancements. Qin Yi planned to accept more missions, purchase origin power in exchange for the technology of electricity. Only when a planet possesses electricity can it truly be considered to have entered a technological civilization. It was the same this time. Qin Yi still did not use the time accelerator, for he wished to have Zizhou lead the army during the Grand Youth Tournament. Had he used the time accelerator, Zizhou would inevitably age as well. He was currently at the peak of his power, and with him at the helm, this army could unleash its greatest advantage. Moreover, even if the time accelerator were used given the current, by the time of the Grand Tournament, Great Xia would have barely popularized electrical engineering, built hydroelectric stations, and supplied electricity to most of its major cities. As for enhancing their strength, they were already proficient in using muskets. As for cannons without rockets or ordinary artillery, had limited effect on low-level energy planets. Take the psionic planet for instance. They could directly manipulate bullets. Even guided missiles could be controlled by such psionicists. And when facing a grand archmage, even the most powerful missiles might prove useless. A single magic array or a control spell could halt a missile's detonation. However, once a technological civilization advanced sufficiently and developed weapons specifically targeting such energies, it was not entirely impossible. Anti-magic shields, anti-mortal energy shields. Without time acceleration, the spread of electrical engineering was also relatively slow. Qin Yi could only instruct Zizhou to continue drilling the army and cease taking on missions. Venerable one, Zizhou said on the high platform, it seems you are preparing for something. Zizhou stood there with Qin Yi floating in the air beside him. Below were 10,000 soldiers undergoing intense training. Qin Yi replied, indeed. Before long there will be many hard battles to fight. We shall face all kinds of planets, traverse all manner of battlefields, and confront diverse enemies. Our current strength, however, is still somewhat lacking. Hearing that there were battles to be fought, Zizhou immediately grew excited. Venerable one, worry not. These are all valiant and seasoned warriors. No matter how formidable the enemy, we will find a way to defeat them. Qin Yi clasped his hands behind and said leisurely, I know that Great Xia has never lost a single battle from its inception to now. But this time the enemies we face are numerous. That is why I instructed you to train new troops. Should casualties run high, these recruits will need to fill the ranks. For we truly cannot afford to fail. Defeat would mean we become just like those planets we once conquered. Only then did Zizhou realize the gravity of the situation. Venerable One, can we not avoid it? Qin Yi shook his head. He replied, no, we cannot. This is the Tao itself. Just as we may plunder others, so too may others plunder us. The weak are prey to the strong survive. This is the Tao. Train them well. With that, Qin Yi gave Zizhou a glimpse of the truth before withdrawing his consciousness. A few days later, Qin Yi rowed a transit boat to the Chaiqing Awakened Union. Mr. Qin, the president, has been waiting inside for some time. Li Xiaoya had been waiting for Qin Yi on the first floor all day. Seeing him arrive at the union, she hurried over to greet him. Qin Yi nodded and followed her to the upper levels. From there one could see a large portion of the city, dense clusters of buildings, all manner of flying creatures, and people of every description. It resembled an apocalyptic metropolis from past life films, yet also a more modern one. The occasional figures soaring by on a flying sword, however, lent it an air of the cultivator world. And with those exotic beasts and rare creatures, it felt like stepping into some video game. Entering the office, Tong Bailey looked at Qin Yi. Tomorrow is the first match of the youth tournament. I trust you are familiar with the rules, so I won't dwell on them. Here is a strand of primordial energy. Your planet is an ordinary energy planet. I'm not sure if you can use it. If you can, then at the very least you'll have a chance to replenish your energy during the competition. Tong Bailey placed great importance on this youth tournament as well. Within this union, he was not truly the sole authority. Many major decisions required deliberation by the Council of Five Elders. As for matters of even greater magnitude concerning Chaiqing's future, the city lord's personal decree was needed. Tong Bailey also wished to secure his position and not be ousted by Yi Jifeng. Qin Yi sat down and took the obsidian. Let me give it a try. He had never used primordial energy before, and wasn't sure if it would work. Since his system required monetary investment, and the time accelerator was his most effective tool, he had never experimented with primordial energy. System, help me simulate what changes would occur to my planet if I were to use this strand of primordial energy. Qin Yi held the obsidian, sensing the primordial energy within, yet not using it hastily. Instead, he consulted the system first. On the panel system, this primordial energy carries true Qi properties. It can extend the lifespan of your planet's inhabitants to 120 years, enhance their physical constitution, and give rise to more intelligent beings. Seeing this, Qin Yi directly entered the awakening space and guided the primordial energy to transform into planetary energy. At that moment, planet civilization, technological civilization, a planet level 2, planet diameter 756. 5 kilometers, planet species 22068. Seeing the information on Qin Yi's planet panel, Tong Bailey was stunned. A technological civilization, level 2, a planet diameter of 756.5 kilometers, and over 22,000 species. What kind of planet was this? Even with all his experience, Tong Bailey had never seen anything like it. He couldn't fathom what sort of planet Lord Qin Yi truly was. If he was ordinary, how had he defeated those low-level unowned planets? If he was formidable, his planet was indeed just an ordinary one, and a technological civilization at that. 100 years ago, when the obsidian meteorite struck the continent, Dian had transitioned from technology into the era of planet lords. Now here he was witnessing a technological civilization again with Qin Yi. Tong Bailey was intensely curious. How had Qin Yi managed to forge an ordinary planet, a technological civilization, into something stronger than even low-level planets? Impressive. It seems miracles truly do keep happening with you. In just over a month, you've expanded an ordinary planet to nearly 800 kilometers in diameter. At this rate, you're bound to become one of Chaiqing's high-level planet lords in the future. After fully converting the primordial energy, Qin Yi heard Tong Bailey's praise, but felt no ripple in his heart. Thank you for your kind words, President. I am unworthy of such praise. With my limited abilities, becoming a high-level planet lord would be like scaling the heavens. Qin Yi did his best to appear bitter and extremely humble. Tong Bailey shook his head and admonished. You went from 1 kilometer on the day of your awakening to over 700 now. That alone proves your potential. Why belittle yourself when you are clearly so strong? You seek freedom, then you must forge a strong heart within yourself. Otherwise your freedom is nothing but a delusion. Qin Yi hadn't expected Tong Bailey to counsel him so earnestly. In that moment, he felt a slight warmth toward the man. In this world of the strong devouring the weak, affection was truly nothing more than a brief exchange. Thank you for your guidance, President. I have never given up. No matter how difficult the road to freedom, I will walk it to the end. Tong Bailey nodded. This is all the intelligence I can gather on some of your opponents. Your information must also be submitted. Given your current planetary data, it actually works to your advantage this time. Everyone will likely overlook you as an ordinary planet lord. You should be prepared yourself and make good use of it. Qin Yi nodded. Playing the fool to catch the wise, he certainly knew how. In fact, he had already thought of this. He attended the banquet at the Union, tasting low-grade immortal pills from a cultivation civilization and sampling delicacies brought by planet lords of spiritual energy planets. After a restful night, he boarded a large transit vessel with the rest of the Union the next day, heading to the venue of the Tin City Joint Youth Tournament. This year it happened to be hosted in Chaiching. At the massive arena, numerous flying devices were broadcasting the event.